When you hear the word spy, you might picture a cloak, a hidden letter, a ring with a compartment. Drop that picture. Most of the job looked like errands and small talk. It smelled like cabbage soup in a cheap inn, and river mud drying on boots. There were no theme songs. There were ledgers, hinges, loose boards, and the habit of not being noticed by anyone who mattered. The people who did this work were not clean heroes. Many were in debt. Some were runaways. Others were servants who might climb one rung if they delivered the right news. A few had schooling, most did not. You did not join for glory. You joined because you needed cash, a pardon, or the hope that someone with power might tilt the balance in your favor. That was enough. Training was thin. You learned to listen without staring. You learned to leave a room without making a chair creak. You learned which lies were safest, because they could be checked and still sound true. You measured risk like a baker measures flour. Not a handful, not a guess, but a level cup. Guesswork ended careers. Measurement kept you alive. The toolkit was names, hours, doors, trades, habits, tavern girls who remembered who took which room, and boys who ran notes between booths. A dagger had a place, but a good agent kept it in the sheath. Steel meant noise. Noise meant eyes. Eyes meant the end of work, and sometimes the end of breathing. The best agent ended the day with clean hands and a head full of details. Details mattered because power ran on schedules. Councils met at set hours. Priests walked to vespers at set bells. Guards who were sober at sunset grew careless after midnight. A window that stuck at noon opened easily when the air cooled. A man who drank 1 cup on Monday might drink 3 on Friday if a payment was due. The calendar of bodies was your map. You followed it the way a carter follows a road. If you wandered, the ditch waited. Payment was unreliable. You might be promised silver and receive thanks and a hard loaf. You might be promised safe passage and meet a gate that would not open. You might be told the Duke would see you, and instead face a clerk who wrote your name without looking up. A contract could be burned. A witness could be persuaded to forget. So you learned to keep a second employer, a second identity, and a second path out when the first bridge failed. Betrayal was not an event. It was a climate. Every handshake carried moisture, even on dry days. You watched friends for signs of hunger because hunger made people brave and cruel. You counted cups on a table and asked why there were 4 when 3 men sat down. You listened for a second set of boots on the stair. You rechecked a name you already knew, because names change when fear moves through a room. You kept stories short. The fewer words you used, the fewer words could be tested. Most intelligence was wrong. That is hard to accept, but it is true. The baker swore he saw the courier at dawn, but he mixed the time because the bells failed. The boy swore the key turned twice, but it was the latch. A monk swore he copied a letter that ordered troops to move, but he copied a draft, not the final. All you could do was weigh errors. If 3 poor witnesses erred in different directions and still landed near the same point, you took that point as a working truth and moved. In this trade, truth was the line you could stand on long enough to finish the job. Meetings were staged in places that already had noise. Side doors of churches, cloisters during choir practice, mills when the wheel turned. Noise gave cover, the place gave excuse. If someone asked why you were there, you showed a prayer book, a sack of barley, or your shoes for repair. A proper meeting looked like 2 errands crossing by chance. If it looked like a meeting, you were in trouble. Messages traveled by hands that looked like they belonged. A cobbler's boy could carry a scrap of leather with a thin sliver of tin pressed with a mark. A washerwoman could carry a stitch pattern that meant a time and a place. A mason could tap a count into a wall at ankle height. Wax seals were rare because wax drew eyes. Cipher was rarer still because cipher ate time and invited questions. The best code was ordinary life. If a man always wore a red cap to market, the day he wore no cap meant go. Falsehood was part of the supply chain. You fed your enemies rumors that cost them time. A loss of time meant a loss of food, of horseshoes, of patience, of trust. You said a gate would be tried on the north wall, and they moved men from the east. You said a bridge was cracked, and carpenters went to the wrong span. You said a marriage would fail, and 2 families delayed an alliance long enough for your sheriff to finish his taxes. The goal was not theater. The goal was friction. Friction wears down plans without leaving glory behind. Your body earned its pay. You slept in rooms you did not like. You ate food you did not choose. You walked at night because the day was watched. Your feet learned every loose board in an inn. Your hands learned how to close a latch without sound. You learned when to look at a man's shoes and when to look at his hands. The way a man tied a purse told you if he had been robbed before. You used smells as clocks. Boiling onions meant the cook was present. Pine pitch meant the courtyard was busy. Lamp oil meant the watch had made a round. You also learned what not to know. If someone asked your true name, you misheard the question. If someone asked where you were born, you remembered to check the fire. If someone asked who paid you, you asked for salt. Ignorance can be chosen. It protects you when your mouth moves faster than your sense. It protects you when you wake in a cell, and the man across the bars calls you by a name you do not like. You cannot betray what you do not carry. People imagine fights. There were fights, but most days the closest you came to a fight was posture. You stepped half a pace right so a man could not pass without turning and showing his belt. You held a cup in your left hand so your right stayed free. You stood by a door that opened inward so you could pull it into a face if you needed 5 seconds. Those seconds kept many hearts beating. They are not in songs, but they matter. The law did not help you. If you were caught in the wrong house with the wrong names in your mouth, no one asked your side. The city needed quiet and you had made noise. So you planned for custody. You learned to faint without hurting yourself, so you could fall in a pile and make a guard call for water. You learned to talk like a fool so people lowered their guard and explained things twice. You learned to cry in the voice of a child, so a woman in the crowd might speak for you when others would not. Escape was made of seconds taken from people who thought they had none to spare. There were bosses. They smiled without warmth. They asked for speed and precision, and offered delay and vagueness when you asked for pay. They wanted maps in a world with few maps. They wanted certainty in a world that breathed. They were not cruel by nature. They were cruel by structure. They sat too far from the streets where people bled. To them, fear was a number. To you, fear was a taste when the light shifted wrong. You translated their demands into tasks you could do and left the rest on the table. You wore clothes that would pass, not too neat, not too torn. You adjusted your accent by inches. You learned which saints were loved in which districts, so you could point at the right painted face when someone asked what you believed. Belief was not the question here. Belief was a set of correct answers at the right moments. You gave those answers and you lived. There was no guild for the trade. There were no dues. There was only memory, the only training manual that never runs out of ink. You learned which constable's nephew cheated at dice. You learned which landlord liked to gossip when drunk, and which went silent. You learned which midwife saw more than she said. You learned who hated whom and why. Hate is a compass. If 2 men hate the same third man, they will stand together just long enough for you to pass between them, with your head down and your ears open. Morality was a moving line. Sometimes you crossed it because you had to. You stole a letter because it would stop a riot. You lied to a widow because the truth would have put a knife in her son's hand. You misled a priest because his superior sold blessings for coins that would buy spears. You told yourself you were preventing worse things. Sometimes that was true. Sometimes it was not. You kept going because stopping felt like drowning. Work makes its own ethics. That is not a defense. It is a fact. Silence was both tool and wage. The tool, hold your tongue and live. The wage, do the job well and no song is sung. Your name leaves a room as if it never entered. Your clothes go on another back. Your notes brown and flake in a chest no one opens. Time erases people who do not claim it with noise. You did not make noise. It was not your role. You were a hinge with grease on it. Doors moved because of you and never thanked the hinge. If you were lucky, age arrived. Knees stopped liking stairs. Eyes lost fine marks on the page. Ears missed a word when a wheel creaked. You felt the job sliding out of your hands. The smart ones left before the job left them. They became innkeepers, bead sellers, knife sharpeners. They took the skills that kept them alive and used them in public. They survived because they did not need applause. They had learned to take pay in quiet. That is the shape of the work. Unshowy, exact, dull when done right, fatal when done wrong. If you require romance, choose another trade. If you need clean lines between good and evil, choose another trade. If you need a story where you always matter, choose another trade. Here you matter only on days when you keep someone else from mattering at all. Here success is measured by events that never happen, riots that never start, ambushes that never find a target. You count negatives and go home by the back lane. Next we will look at collection methods. Not trick ciphers or riddles that please a stage. The real methods, the ones that turn gossip into a map. The ones that produce mistakes you can tolerate. The ones that do not get you killed on a Wednesday because a bell rang early. When we finish, you will not love this trade. You will only see it clearly. That is all the respect it has ever wanted. In sieges, smashing stone was only part of the plan. The rest was pressure on minds. The slow erosion of will before any wall actually fell. Engines were not only hardware. They were signs, vast, creaking, burning signs, that said the same thing over and over: you are not safe. Every wheel that groaned on a tower, every arc from a trebuchet's throw planted that thought behind the battlements. Commanders in older ages understood this performance. Assyrians pulled their engines openly across sand, so all could watch fate moving nearer. Romans built siege camps, where defenders could see rams assembled and catapults tested in daylight. Siege was theater, and fear was written into the play. Sometimes the projectiles themselves spoke. Heads of messengers or generals launched over the parapet, armor still on, a message with no need of words. At Constantinople, it was not only stones that fell inside, but bodies. Diseased corpses were sent to spread terror and plague. During the Mongol attack on Kaffa in 1346, throwing plague-ridden bodies over the walls is believed to have helped spark outbreaks of the Black Death beyond the city. The trebuchet was more than a tool. It was an announcement that carried on the wind. When one of those giants rolled into position, people inside heard it before they saw it. Winches creaking, ropes grinding, the counterweight landing with a heavy thunk like the heartbeat of a storm coming closer. The worst part was the unknown. No one knew what the next shot would be. A rock, a jar of fire, a rain of arrows, or nothing at all. That thick pause while engineers adjusted their aim worked on nerves like a weapon of its own. Sound turned into pressure. The steady rhythm of a ram or the sudden hush before a throw made steady hands unsteady. Leaders wanted despair, convinced defenders that holding out was futile, that their gods had turned away, that walls were only temporary steps on a road already chosen. When that mental dam cracked, gates often opened without steel deciding it, because in sieges mines sometimes broke before masonry did. Yet for all its destructive weight, the trebuchet was not fast. It took hours to prepare, minutes to reload, and demanded skilled crews. Still, nothing else combined reach, force, and psychological dread quite the same way. It was the age's slow-motion hammer from above, and when the counterweight dropped, whole cities held their breath. Catapults harassed from range, and rams beat on gates, but towers brought the fight up close. Towers did not try to be subtle. Picture a wooden building on wheels, covered in wet hides against fire, bristling with archers and spearmen, rolling forward like a moving wall. From the top deck, arrows fell on the crest. When the gangplank tipped, combat arrived at arm's length. The logic was plain. Walls help only if attackers cannot get over them. Towers erase that advantage by delivering height to the same place defenders trusted most, their own parapet. The design had long roots. Assyrians likely used early versions. Greek and Hellenistic armies pushed the idea to spectacle. At Rhodes in 305 BCE, Demetrius built a 9-story tower later called the Taker of Cities. plate-faced, equipped with onboard engines, moved by masses of men, a mobile fortress and artillery platform in one. The ambition was unmatched. The weight proved its limit. Even so, when a tower reached the wall and the bridge went down, panic followed, because panic grows fastest where enemies can touch each other. Towers were not invincible. Mud slowed them. Fire arrows, dropped stones, and ruined ground punished them. Defenders dug ditches, flooded moats, and built secondary lines to stall the approach. But when towers worked, they worked in a way a breach never did. They turned a city's own crest into the place where order failed first. Some of the worst damage arrived unseen. While rams hit gates and towers reached for height, the ground itself could be turned into a weapon. Tunneling, sapping was the quiet killer. Dig beneath a wall, prop the cut with timbers, pack the void with fuel, set it alight, and let the supports burn. When the wood failed, the tunnel collapsed and the foundation with it. One moment a city looked solid. The next, a section of wall dropped like stale bread. The act was simple in plan, brutal in the doing. It demanded time, labor, and a tolerance for darkness. It did not look glorious. There were no drums, only dirt, heat, and air that grew thin. Countermeasures developed into their own craft. Listen for taps in the soil. Dig toward the sound, meet the enemy underground with knives, shovels, and torches. At Plataea in 429 BCE, defenders intercepted tunneling mid-dig and turned soil into a knife-fight nightmare. In 1212 at Rochester Castle, sappers burned supports packed with pig fat and brought down a whole tower, shock doing the rest. Not every story belonged to attackers. Defenders had fire to answer fire. Greek fire, developed by the Byzantines around the 7th century, was the most feared. A sticky, flame-holding substance that clung to ship, wall, and flesh, and kept burning even on water. Pushed through siphons or thrown in pots, it produced scenes of chaos. The exact formula was guarded so tightly that it died with the empire. The effect did not. Entire squadrons became frames of flame within minutes. Low-tech pours were common and effective, boiling water, oil, or sand through murder holes. The neat-sounding slots over gates and passages meant to make the way below lethal. Oil was dreaded because it soaked cloth and armor, and then lit. Hot sand looked unimpressive from a distance, but it slipped under plates at neck and wrist and burned where hands could not reach. What seemed small from the outer field felt like raw panic on a ladder. Gravity never changed sides. Stones and beams fell from height onto engines and close-packed ranks. The aim was not just bodies. It was broken tools and broken patterns at once. Traps did the rest, pits, collapsing bridges, spiked barricades. Castles were not merely homes. They were puzzles designed to slow, confuse, and punish. All of it served one purpose: delay. Every minute a wall stood was a minute closer to thin supply lines, to sickness moving through camps, or to a relief force appearing where hope thought it would. Siege was attrition, and while attackers had physics, defenders answered with invention and boiling rage. Across a campaign, the physics favored the thrower and the striker at distance. The defenders tried to answer with heat, height, and time. That is why so much of siegecraft was pressure made visible. Engines paraded in view. Camps raised where eyes could not ignore them. Drums and thumps arranged so that even silence said more is coming. The show mattered because the target was not only stone. The target was the line inside a person that holds a wall together. Break that line, and gates move on their own. When gunpowder surged into the story in the late medieval period, the wooden frames did not vanish in meaning. They turned into lessons for something louder. Cannons changed everything. A single well-placed shot did in seconds what a trebuchet needed, hours to approach. Stone walls, once the answer to everything, became liabilities. By the 15th century, castles across Europe faced iron balls that smashed parapets and turned confidence into rubble. Siege warfare shifted into an explosive, deafening phase, but the old principles held their shape underneath. Modern artillery still answers the same question. Catapult and trebuchet asked, How do you break what was built to be unbreakable from a distance? Trajectory, tension, and force, ideas tested and refined centuries before powder, stayed central. Even the modern language of shock and awe, overwhelming firepower and visible dominance, has roots in those earlier parades of engines rolling forward with flags snapping. They were the original performance, not just breaching a wall but bending a city's will. So the clear summary runs like this. Siegecraft was a system. Engines hit from afar. Towers delivered men to the crest. Fire stripped nerve. Tunnels took foundations. Traps and gravity slowed the advance. And through it all, time was a weapon that either side could wield, if they learned how to spend it. The psychology was not decoration. It was half the method. It told a city that resistance was both dangerous and pointless. Once enough people believed that masonry did not need to fall to end the fight. Mines fell first. The people between you and a target were not just guards with halberds. They were cooks, scribes, stable boys, and porters, small eyes in every corridor. One wrong glance and a whisper could reach the captain of the watch before you could say you were just the herbalist. An assassin did not fight only steel. They fought gossip, and in the Middle Ages gossip moved fast when it might save a neck. The target was fearful with reason. Power drew rivals, cousins with claims, and courtiers who smiled too hard. Meals were not touched without a tester. Doors closed under 3 locks. Some slept in decoy beds. Others rotated rooms like a grim game of musical chairs. Their banquet sounded like a weak point. Wine flowing, attention scattered, but it cut both ways. You might be drunk as well, still facing royal guards. A few dogs, a watchful fool who missed nothing, and a crowd of witnesses gripping tankards. Getting close could take weeks. Poser's staff, bribe a chambermaid, ride inside a barrel. When the instant finally arrived, you had one chance, quiet, precise, without a squeak or a mess, and then gone like a ghost. Fail, and you became the next lesson on a gate, swinging beside a sign that read, "Nice try." The picture people carry of a medieval killer, sleek black robes, tidy leather braces. A hood caught by moonlight is a storybook. Reality looked like a sickly goat herder with something to hide. Disguises were not couture. They were whatever you could scavenge. Peasant rags, a monk's robe 2 sizes large, a guard's tunic that still smelled of the last owner. The aim was to blend, and blending meant looking like everyone who had not bathed in 2 weeks, limped from old knocks, and twitched from hunger. Suspicion did not come from a cloak. It came from hands fidgeting at a belt where a dagger sat wrapped in cheesecloth. Masks were no help. There was no neat Guy Fawkes option. Most face coverings made you look like a leper, good for avoiding talk, terrible for getting into halls. If someone asked who you were, you needed a fast lie. Brother Tobias, keeper of silent prayer and rooftop maintenance. Even if the door opened, noble households were not full of fools. Servants clocked unfamiliar faces, especially ones that dropped chamber pots or could not name the cook's cat. You were always one "I've never seen you" away from a candlestick to the skull. If the disguise held, the work got harder. Now you had to keep the act for hours, while trying not to notice a parade of very stab-worthy backs walking past. Wigs were not coming to save you. If you needed to look older or younger, you smeared dirt, squinted, and hoped no one stood close enough to see that your beard stuck with honey. Disguises did not protect you. They bought you 5 confused minutes. After that you had to be gone, invisible or very persuasive. The household web was the real wall. The laundress knew whose shirts came back bloodied. The scullion knew who ate in what order. The steward knew which door squeaked unless you lifted as you pulled. Each person had a stake in quiet, and you were noise. You were also a story waiting to be traded for safety. The more rooms you crossed, the more chances a name tripped you. So the work favored patience over bravado. You learned routes at odd hours, timed lantern rounds, and felt for loose planks with your toes. You learned which dog slept through footsteps, and which woke when a hinge breathed. You learned to smell kitchens from a hall, so you could square your face with the right kind of steam before someone asked why you were near the ovens at all. The trade fought with senses as much as with blades. Targets built rituals for a reason. They ate in sequence. They moved with escorts. They kept testers between the plate and the tongue. Locks multiplied and beds lied. A feast rarely loosened the pattern enough to matter. Drunk guards are noisy guards, but they are also many, and noise draws others. The jester, the one paid to notice, noticed. A good plan treated celebration as a place to study, not strike. The strike lived in corridors, in breathless turns, in places where 3 steps meant a door, a stair, a shadow. You needed a move that left no echo and a route that erased you after it. Otherwise, morning light would write your name across a gate for all to see. Clothes never made the work safe. What made it possible was looking like an unremarkable problem to ignore. Limp a little, carry a bucket, mutter about orders. Learn to hold a ladle like a person who has done it 100 times. Learn the weight of a brazier, so your arms do not betray you. Learn which hall needs a bucket left, just so as a pretext to return. The fewer words you used, the longer you remained a fixture rather than a face. A fixture survives because no one remembers when it arrived. A face invites questions. That was the arithmetic, and always the one chance. There was no heroic flurry, no long duel with sparks in a moonlit courtyard. There was a small exact moment cut out of a pattern, a tester gone to relieve himself, a lock half-turned for a breath, a dog distracted by a dropped bone. The act had to be silent, clean, and final. Squeaks were failure. Blood spray was failure. Anything that made the next room awake was failure. The goal was not to win a fight. The goal was to make sure a fight never started. Then you left in such a way that no one could be sure you were ever there. If the moment slipped, the punishment was public and loud on purpose. Bodies on gates, placards with taunts. The point was deterrence by spectacle. Turn one intruder into a lesson. That spectacle fed the very network you had tried to slip through. The servants who saw, the guards who joked, the townsfolk who gawked and carried the tale home. After that, every unfamiliar boot heel rang twice as loud on flagstones. Every robe with the wrong hem drew new eyes. A failed attempt did not just end one mission. It hardened the whole field for months. So the fantasy, smooth gear, perfect disguise, easy entry, is the opposite of the record. You were hungry, poorly clothed, badly shaved, and always a sentence away from a beating. You moved by borrowing other people's routines, and hoped they would not notice the loan. The heroism, if there was any, hid in restraint. Not stabbing when it sounded right but looked wrong. Not taking the open door when the floorboard at its threshold had betrayed others before you. Not trusting a corridor because your feet wanted the shortcut. This was unglamorous craft, held together by nerves and habit. Even the best disguise could not fix hands. Hands tell. A fake monk who has never hauled water gives it away in how he grips a pail. A guard who has never oiled leather fumbles a strap. A cook's boy who does not step back from a swinging oven door has not been burned yet. Rooms have their own choreography, and you either knew it or you did not. When you did not, the room taught you with noise, and noise brought men with questions. 5 quiet minutes was the most a disguise bought. After that, you needed skill or you needed to disappear. In the end, the trade was less about daring than about subtraction, removing chances to be noticed, removing reasons to be addressed, removing any mark that said stranger. Your tools were small, cloth. Dirt, breath, timing, and your opponents were many, beginning with the people who changed straw ticks, and ending with the one person whose death would mean nothing unless you were not there when it happened. The work's truth was simple. If the room remembers you, you already failed. Stories love clever bottles and masked banquets. Reality did not. Poison existed, but it was not a miracle key. Food had tasters. Cups were swapped. Plates were changed at the last step. Kitchens were crowded, and crowded rooms remember hands that do not belong. A powder that works in a tale often fails in a hall where every mouthful is watched, and where the person you want sits behind 2 layers of men whose job is to taste what he tastes. If poison appeared, it more often came from someone already inside the routine, a cook, a servant, a cupbearer, because the job was habit, not drama. You could not stroll in with a vial and rewrite the order of a noble house. The order rewrote you. Locks were not puzzles for brilliant thieves as much as they were a clock for everyone else. 3 bolts meant 3 checks, each with a sound that echoed in a corridor. You listened and learned the rhythm, which bolt lifted stiff, which latch squeaked when pulled instead of pushed, which key stayed in the door because the guard did not like the weight on his belt. You learned which rooms changed more often and which never did. Some targets slept in decoys, some moved each night, some had body doubles that took the first plate and the first step into a corridor. Your plan could not depend on a single door. It needed 3 ways to reach a moment and 3 ways to leave it. Disguises bought minutes, not safety. A robe, a tunic, a hood, these were tickets through the first doorway, not past the second. Hands betrayed you, so did feet. So did how you carried a bucket, or which shoulder you favored under a load. Real staff worked in lines: fetch, pass, clean, return. Step wrong and you were a bump in that river. Bumps make noise. Noise brings faces. The guard who was bored 5 minutes ago was now curious, because curiosity was safer than the punishment for missing something. Your answer had to be ready before his question landed, and not the kind of answer that invited a second question. Orders from the steward. Lamp oil for the north stair. The chamber pot cracked. Short, work-shaped, boring. Banquets tempted bad plans. People imagine its noise as cover and wine as a blindfold. But drunks stare. Drunks talk. Drunks repeat a question because they forgot they asked it already. Drunk guards are heavy on their feet, but there are more of them, and the sober ones resent the drunk ones enough to watch harder. If a strike happened, it was not across a crowded table. It was late in the corridor behind the feast, when a tester stepped away for air or to piss, or to mutter to a servant about a stain on a sleeve. Moments are narrow. They are not opportunities you discover. They are openings you built by showing up as nothing for days. The kitchen was both danger and shield. Heat, steam, shouting, everything moved fast. If you could be a pair of hands there, you were invisible to anyone not in the kitchen, and permanently visible to those who were. Cooks knew faces like a shepherd knows sheep. If you could hold a ladle, know when to duck and stack plates without staring at the wrong door, you lasted long enough to time the testers, the stewards, and the guard who always came for scraps at the same bell. But a cook who did not know you could stop your heart with one shout, and every guard in earshot would arrive grateful for the excuse to hit something. The kitchen let you measure the house. It also measured you back. Gossip policed as much as steel. A maid wanted safer work and would trade a face for a promise. A porter wanted fewer stairs and would trade a name for a coin. A boy wanted to be brave and would trade a sighting for cheers. None of them thought of it as betrayal. It was how their world answered fear. A household is a net. You were a knot that did not belong. People tugged on knots that feel wrong. That is why the job rewarded restraint. One question too many in the wrong voice told everyone you were not what you said. One extra glance at the wrong door made you look like a door watcher. Quiet kept the line from forming behind you. Tools were small and dull on purpose. A cloth to deaden a hinge, a scrap of leather to mute a latch, a pin to lift a simple ward, a cord to pull a bolt from the far side if it had play. Nothing shining. Nothing that would remain if dropped, and make a story for the morning. Big tools wrote their own confessions. Little ones made no claims. If a door could not be persuaded, you did not argue with it. You went looking for another door, or you left. Pride killed more people than locks did. If food could be turned, it was rarely by a stranger. It was by someone already trusted and already tied to the table. Someone with a small debt, a sick child, a brother in trouble, or a simple wish to leave. The promise for that person could not be loud. It had to be a quiet change. A rent lowered, a seat by a warm oven, a name written in a letter that would pass a gate. Coins shone and drew eyes. Quiet help spread slowly and vanished into routine. If the act was discovered, the house answered with noise, beating, stocks, a body hung where everyone who carried a tray would have to see it twice a day. Spectacle trained the staff. It trained you too. The common picture of a corridor duel is wrong. Blades were tools for error, not success. A clean job left no duel to remember. A bad job caused one, and then the first clang wrote your name on the stones. Steel is loud. Armor is loud. Boots are loud. Even breath is loud when the house holds it and listens at once. If the last step to the door turned into a fight, you were already late. You were already in the story the house would tell about itself tomorrow. Exit mattered more than entry. Entry depended on a chance you created, a borrowed tunic, a timed hinge, a face that belonged for 10 minutes. Exit depended on the house not realizing a story had started. A fast run meant stairs, and stairs meant echo. Echo meant pursuit. The good route was sideways and downward, through rooms where your new face still fit. The bucket you carried in felt stupid. It was your way back out. The smudge on your cheek that let you blend in felt childish. It kept a boy from pointing when your shoulder brushed his. Doors that open inward can be pulled to become shields. Doors that open outward can be used to knock someone off balance without a shout. Those seconds bought space. Space became distance. Distance beat men who knew the halls better than you did. Failure did not end at the wall. Punishment knew what it was for. Bodies at gates. Heads above market roads. Signs with jokes that were not funny to anyone you ever knew. The lesson was public so that private rooms stayed safer tomorrow. After a failed attempt, every hallway grew narrower. Every voice in a guardroom got braver. Every servant decided to notice things they used to ignore. A single mistake taught a whole town to dislike strangers, and you needed to be a stranger again the next week in another place. Patience was not fancy. It was the engine that turned risk into schedule. You watched when plates changed, when lamps were trimmed, when baskets moved, when keys were not where they should be. You learned the one step in a stair that complained, and the one door that stuck only on wet nights. You stood still long enough to learn who hummed and who never spoke. You were building a simple machine from other people's habits and then using it once. There was no prize for speed. There was only the moment when the moving parts aligned and made a gap the size of a breath. Fear worked on you too. It ran in both directions. Hands sweat. Knees fail. Eyes slide to the wrong light. You train for that by giving yourself smaller tests in the same rooms. Hold a hot pan and do not flinch. Walk past a guard and do not look at the spear. Answer a question and do not add a second sentence. A house is a stage where silence is the best actor you have. Silence lets you be furniture. Furniture survives because no one thinks about it. If you needed a second person, you did not move as a pair. Pairs attract attention. You moved as two problems that never touched. One created a question. A dropped tray, a spilled pail, a door that would not close. The other passed through the space that question opened, and then left nothing behind. If you had to meet, you met where meeting looked normal. A stair landing with traffic, a pantry with arguments about flour, a yard where dogs barked anyway. Clean work did not look like work at all. It looked like the sort of nonsense that fills a day and leaves no story to tell about it. In rooms that mattered, testers mattered more. They were the delay built into the act. They cut bites, sipped cups, watched for color and smoke, and stood between the table and anyone who wanted to believe in safety. Plans that ignored testers ended in noise. Plans that included testers became plans about time, not chemistry. You waited for a throat to clear, a hand to wave, a nod to pass a plate. The moment lived in what happened in the second after the tester looked away. If that second never came, the plan did not exist. No matter how clever the vial in your sleeve felt, people outside think the job is boldness. Inside it is subtraction. You remove choices that make you visible. You remove questions by giving small work-shaped answers. You remove marks, dirt, ash, stray thread, that would make a watcher remember your back tomorrow. You remove a target from a room by removing sound from the act. Remove, 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 until only an ordinary night remains for everyone else. If the room wakes with a story, you did not do the work the job demands. And when it was done, there was no celebration. You did not linger. You did not look back. You did not wait to admire stillness. You folded back into the same lines that hid you, put down what you carried, and became the kind of person no one describes well. Some kitchen boy, a monk with a cracked voice, and a porter with a limp. If a memory formed, it had to be vague. Vague memories do not hold when a captain asks hard questions at dawn. That is the plain shape of it. No costume drama, no easy poisons, no graceful duels. Just rooms that know themselves, people who notice what does not belong, locks that make a noise you cannot afford, and a path in and out that exists only if you built it the slow way. If the house cannot remember a moment, you did your job. If it can, it will lift a body onto a wall to make sure the next stranger thinks twice before stepping where you stepped. Power did not rely on strength alone. It relied on example. When a siege failed at the wall or an assassin failed at a door, the next move belonged to the people who ran the city, and they knew what message they wanted heard. Punishment was not private. It was public on purpose. Bodies went to gates, heads went above roads, signs went on posts with jokes that were not jokes to anyone who had to walk by twice a day. The lesson was the point. Turn one person into a warning, so 100 people think twice before doing the same thing tomorrow. The threat of steel mattered. The sight of consequences mattered more in the long run. Spectacle controlled the rumor mill better than proclamations did. A decree could be ignored, debated, or mocked. A body hung where everyone fetched water removed argument. Servants crossed that yard. Guards changed shifts under that wall. Market stalls opened within view of that example. A city trains itself on what it is forced to see. After a failure, a household or a garrison did not simply tighten security. It retold the event until the retelling hardened into new habit. That is how corridors became narrower without bricks moving, and how questions multiplied without anyone writing a new rule. Gossip enforced policy faster than laws. A maid who saw a stranger dragged out of a pantry did not need a meeting to adjust her behavior. A porter who heard a captain praise a boy for naming a face he did not recognize did not need a manual. The net tightened because each person protected their own small safety by noticing more than yesterday. You, as the intruder who might have to come back next week in another house, now faced an audience primed to treat odd as dangerous. The badge on a guard's tunic said authority, but the talk in a laundry room moved people at scale. This is why systems leaned on theater as part of defense and rule. Siege camps paraded engines within sightlines to grind will. City rulers paraded consequences within traffic lines to grind nerve. The idea was the same. Put pressure on the mind before any new blow lands. If fear does the work, iron can rest. The cost of staging is low once you have an example to stage. And leaders of all kinds understood that one graphic memory shifted conduct more reliably than pages of instruction. None of this required modern tools. A wall gave height, height gave reach, reach gave message. The same places used to pour oil or sand through murder holes could frame a view for a hanging board. The same squares used to hear troop orders could hold stocks and displays. A city is a machine for moving eyes along paths. Whoever understood those paths could use them to move behavior too. After a very public failure, vigilance had a schedule. For a time, every unfamiliar boot was louder. Lantern rounds were closer together. Jesters, paid to see what others missed, noticed even more. Stewards verified names twice. Tasters hovered longer between plate and mouth. Dogs that were ignored began to get fed, walked and sat near doors where footsteps echoed. The field you were trying to cross had changed shape. You could not rush through it because rushing signaled panic. You could not dawdle because lingering signaled purpose. The only workable approach was to become a piece of small work again and wait for the net to loosen on its own. which it always did, because people do not live at full alert forever. Failure also reshaped the outer world. Markets that tolerated strangers yesterday asked for introductions tomorrow. Gate guards who waved carts through began tapping on boards and feeling for hidden space. Stable boys who once sold small hints for small coins sold nothing at any price, because the last boy who talked had been beaten where everyone could count the blows. You were not just working against walls and locks. You were working against an atmosphere that had been thickened on purpose. Inside a siege, spectacle operated at a different scale, but with the same logic. The sound of a trebuchet announced power. The sight of damage announced inevitability. The display of captured men, heads, or messages announced what would happen next if resistance continued. Attackers wanted despair to set before the breach, because a city that opens its own gates costs less wood, less food, and fewer lives. Defenders answered by staging their own shows. Roaring fire from walls, boiling pores through kill slots, stones and beams dropping at choke points. Both sides kept audiences in mind. The audience on the ground was the garrison. The audience beyond was the town. The script said, "We can endure." They cannot. If that script faltered, the other side's script took over. When gunpowder changed the tools, it did not erase the need for staging. Cannons did more damage faster, but cities still watched and minds still bent or held. A wall shattered by iron shot told a very clear story. A barrage that walked along battlements told another. Even then, punishment and display after a failed sortie or a botched night raid trained the survivors faster than orders could. The grammar of pressure, show, repeat, surround, stayed in place. Aftermath also pushed inward. In a noble house shaken by an attempt, routines grew teeth. Locks multiplied. Beds moved. Rooms rotated. Testers stood closer. The steward who had once allowed improvisation cut it out. "We do it this way every time" became the shield. That kind of rigid schedule helped you as an observer. Fixed patterns are easier to map, and hurt you as an intruder. Fixed patterns are harder to pierce without sending a ripple. Your answer was the same as before. Small work, anchored clocks, short questions, and patience until someone else's boredom built a gap. Disguises lost even more value after a scare. A new robe was no longer a pass, it was a flag. People looked harder at hands, tools, and tiny behaviors. Did the monk know how to haul water? Did the porter move like someone who carried loads yesterday too? Did the kitchen boy flinch at steam? Rooms have choreographies. In calm times you could fake your way through them for a few minutes. After a public failure, the choreography became the test. Anyone out of step heard a cough, then a question, then another, and then boots. The household's small incentives shifted too. A coin paid in a corner was no longer tempting if being seen with a stranger carried real danger. Safer rewards, lower rent, a warm seat by an oven, a quiet letter that passed a gate, worked better because they blended into life. Loud help made noise, and noise was the very thing the house had trained to notice. If you had to recruit inside a shaken house, you did it with favors that looked like nothing at all from a distance. The line between myth and record hardened after spectacle. Stories prefer lone heroes, daring duels, and clean escapes. After a failed attempt and a week of public talk, the story that stuck was about 100 small eyes that noticed, a hinged door that squeaked, a tester who glanced at the right second, a guard who followed a hunch because last Thursday taught him to. That is the version that changed future behavior. The myth brought applause. The record brought routines. It was the routines that you had to answer. Even when nothing dramatic happened, the threat of spectacle shaped choices. A cook who might have looked away before now kept a sharp account. A watch captain who once tolerated late arrivals now set examples at dawn. People policed themselves because the cost of being in the next display was too high. Self-policing made your job thinner and longer. You still looked for the same joints, times, routes, habits, but you had to accept that the intervals between joints would widen. What was a 3-day plan became a 3-week plan, or it failed. Counter-pressure existed, but it was slow. The same human limits that create openings also soften vigilance over time. Fear is tired work. People drift toward normal because the day demands it. Food must move, water must be carried, keys must be used, doors must open, errands must run. Every routine that returned to ordinary created space again. Your task was to survive the sharp period without triggering another display, then move when the edge dulled. This rhythm, shock, spectacle, hardening, drift, repeats. Armies and households both run on it. It explains why patience pays and why heroics rarely do. A breach made by one bold rush is remembered. 10 breaches opened by time and quiet adjustments are not. You needed the forgettable kind. You needed the kind that leaves no story in a room. If a captain can retell what you did in 3 sentences to a group of men at dawn, you made his job easier and your job harder. The same arithmetic governed exits. Leaving clean mattered more after a public lesson, because pursuit was faster and louder. You still avoided stairs when you could, used doors that opened the right way to win seconds, and carried the same prop in and out so no one had to invent a new memory for you. But now, even a perfect route might fail because someone on that route had been told a story yesterday and wanted to be the person who stopped the next one. That is not a clever obstacle you can outthink in a minute. That is a mood that saturates a building. You outlast it. Where poison appears in stories, it tends to erase complexity. In rooms trained by spectacle, it rarely could. Tasters were the built-in delay. Switched cups and swapped plates were the built-in noise. Chemistry did not beat process. If there was a way to turn food, it still had to pass through habits and eyes in the single second when the tester looked away. After a scare, that second shrank. A plan that pretended otherwise was not a plan. It was a wish. In the wider field, deterrence worked on pay as well as fear. Employers delayed silver, promised safe conducts, and then redefined safe. That made you keep second routes, second names, and second buyers for the same information. Caution was not paranoia. It was the only way to ensure that one broken promise did not end the whole line of work. Public examples taught you not only how towns responded to failure, but also how bosses responded to success, often by pretending not to owe you. That too shaped exits, so the plain summary holds. Authority uses what people see to shape what people do. Siege engines on a ridge tell a city to give up. A body on a gate tells a neighborhood to watch. A shouted beating in a kitchen tells a hallway to speak. Aftermath is policy written in display and routine. Your answer, if you insist on moving in that world, is still subtraction. Remove reasons to be remembered. Remove moments that become stories. Remove the urge to hurry just because fear tells you to. Wait until the city blinks. Then move once without noise and leave nothing the room can retell in the morning. Early battering wasn't elegant. The first rams were handheld. Teams of soldiers hoisted a tree trunk and slammed it against gates like furious lumbermen. Over time, engineers learned a simple lesson. Mount the ram in a wheeled frame, roof it, and the tool becomes a terror. A canopy shielded crews from arrows and boiling pores, and the frame turned raw muscle into repeatable force. In effect, the ram stopped being just a log and became a moving instrument of pressure. Assyrian armies set the pattern for how to use that pressure on the mind. They didn't bring a ram to a gate as a surprise. They brought it as a message. Their towers paired rams with archer decks, so while a city watched its doors get bullied, its walls were combed by missiles. Reliefs from Nineveh show iron-capped rams rolling toward stubborn gates, like slow, deliberate gods of ruin. The spectacle was the point. You were meant to see inevitability coming on wheels. And it wasn't only the front door that suffered. Once the enemy believed the gate would fail, defenses elsewhere grew thin, choices got worse, and the whole plan bent toward collapse. Under the earth, a different instrument worked with quieter dread. At Plataea in 429 BCE, attackers tried to take the wall from below. Defenders answered by digging their own shafts, meeting the enemy in tunnels where air and space ran out fast. That defense, countermining, added a grim layer to siegecraft. Men groping toward the sound of picks, then fighting by torchlight with blades and shovels in choking dark. There was no glory down there, only fear and dirt. Still, when undermining succeeded, the results were shocking. At Rochester in 1212, sappers fired timbers packed with pig fat beneath a tower. Supports failed, the tower dropped, and surrender followed. By the 1200s, specialists could judge soils, find weak footings, and plan collapses with unnerving accuracy. Half geology, half demolition. If you couldn't go over or through a wall, you took it from beneath. Defenders answered above ground with heat and gravity. Greek fire, Byzantine, 7th century, was the nightmare blend. Sticky flame that held to ships, stone and skin, and kept burning even on water. Whether forced through siphons or lobbed in pots, it turned order into panic in minutes. The formula died with the empire, but the memory of its effect didn't. More ordinary pours did steady work, boiling water, oil, or sand down murder holes, those tidy slots above gateways that made a straight approach into a trap. Oil clung soaked cloth and armor, then lit. Hot sand slid into gaps at the neck and wrist and cooked what it touched. From far off, these measures looked small. Up close, they broke men off ladders. Defenders also trusted simple physics. Stones, beams, even carcasses fell from height to break machines and nerves together. Castles added pits, collapsing bridges, and spikes to slow and punish. All of it bought the same prize, time. The longer a wall held, the thinner the attackers' supplies, the sicker their camps, the closer a relief force. Siege was attrition. Delay did as much as killing. Rams evolved because defenders learned. A bare log invites fire and arrows. A housed ram shrugs off both better. Roofs got thicker, hides wetter, iron caps sharper. Frames grew stout enough to carry their own little storm, crews who knew how, to keep the beaten shields that ate darts long enough to let iron meet oak. The rhythm itself did work. Thump after thump taught hinges and hearts to loosen. A city that hears that drum line for hours starts to feel the gate already opening. Assyrian pairings, ram below, archers above, turned the approach into a layered grind that punished any defender who showed his face. The method was ancient and obvious, which is why it endured. Towers carried the same lesson upward. A moving multi-story frame skinned in soaked hides brought men to the crest with a bridge's certainty. You could harry a tower with fire, and stone you could ditch and flood its path, you could feed it trouble. But if it touched the battlement and dropped a gangway, panic spread at arm's length. Panic grows fastest where people can reach each other, and towers were built to deliver that reach. Assyrian imagery gives you the logic in wood and bronze, height for arrows, cover for crews, and a ram chewing the door, while the wall itself goes blind under a hail of shafts. The underground thread kept tightening because it was cheap compared with lumber and iron. A tunnel needed labor, nerve, and fuel. The fuel burned the props. The props failed the floor failed the wall. Countermining did not stop because it was awful. It endured because it worked. The duel below became a craft. Listening through soil, tracking faint taps, steering by sound, then colliding in cramped heat. The words in the record are all the same. Suffocation, torch smoke, stabbing, collapse, because nothing down there looked heroic. Git only decided what fell next. Meanwhile, the wall remained a platform more than a surface. Murder holes weren't ornaments. They were pipes for pain. Everything that pours finds a body somewhere, and the straight path under a gate concentrates bodies like a funnel. Oil had the worst reputation because it turned one strike into two, first the scald, then the flame. Sand looked harmless until it found skin under iron. Then it lasted. Gravity did not need a recipe. A thrown block that wrecked a ram's frame or crushed a crew broke more than timber. It shook the hands that pushed the next machine. Delay again was the real weapon. Every hour a tower stalled, the camp paid in wood, food, and patience. Rams also taught a political lesson. Relief carvings were propaganda as much as memory, showing the machine as unstoppable because the rulers needed subjects and rivals to believe it. A slow-moving god that breaks gates suggests order that cannot be refused. Siege equipment wrote law in wood. The Assyrians understood that building a thing in public writes a sentence before it strikes a blow, and that sentence says, "This ends one way." When mining made a wall fall, the city learned a different sentence. Foundations can lie. A skyline that looked permanent could vanish in an hour. Rochester's collapse wasn't just a hole, it was a lesson in how trust fails. Stone, then courage. After enough collapses, even rumors of picks in a cellar made people listen harder at night. That is how counter-mining became a standard, not an oddity. Every city that could learned to hear. Fire's reputation stuck because fire changes crowds faster than steel. Greek fire's terror wasn't only chemistry, it was certainty. Sailors and soldiers watched burning liquid ignore water and felt the future narrow. You do not need the recipe to keep the fear alive. You only need the memory of crews who vanished inside flames that would not die. Lesser heats, water, oil, sand, worked because they turned ladders and doors into places no one wanted to be. A siege turns space into verdicts. This stair kills, that gate burns, this alley breaks ankles. The more verdicts a defender writes, the slower the siege. The engine room of all this was patience. Rams needed crews that could keep the beat under rain, arrows and mockery. Towers needed wheels that would still turn in mud, and plans for ground that refused them. Tunnels needed diggers who did not panic in dark. Walls needed men who would keep pouring from the same hole, same angle, same scream, until the crowd below learned. None of these acts are grand in a line. They become grand in a day. Siegecraft is repetition until something important fails. By the later Middle Ages, gunpowder would rewrite the hardware but not the habits. Cannons tore parapets in moments where a trebuchet asked for afternoons, yet the old questions persisted. Where do you push? How do you make people hear the end? Before it arrives, the ram's beat survives in bombardment schedules. The tower's promise of height survives in artillery positions that make walls irrelevant. The tunnel's threat survives in every plan that treats foundations as the true target. The defender's hot answers survive in anything that makes a route feel cursed. Tools change, pressure doesn't. So the plain outline stands. A housed ram turns muscle into a metronome that eats doors. Towers turn distance into touch. Tunnels turn certainty into holes. Walls turn height into heat and weight. And over everything. Runs time, stolen by defenders, spent by attackers, taxed by weather, disease, and rumor. The carvings at Nineveh and the stories from Rochester and Plataea sit on one shelf because they teach one thing. Siege is a system. You stack parts, you wear people, and then the weakest piece quits. That piece might be wood, iron, stone, or a mind. In practice, you take whichever fails first and claim design. If you need a single sentence to carry forward, take this. The best engines were not only stronger, they were steadier. Steady beat at the gate, steady wheels toward the wall, steady hands under the earth, steady paws from above. Steady is what bends will. The rest, flame, iron, collapse, arrives after steady has done its work. A siege did not press only on stone. It pressed on bread, water, wood, and nerve. Camps looked large and loud from the walls, but up close they were lists that had to be met every day. Grain had to arrive, animals had to eat, fires had to be fed, tools had to be mended, and men had to be kept from rotting where they stood. If any one of those lines broke, pressure sagged. Time, not glory, decided most outcomes. The longer the ring held, the more weight moved from engines to stomachs. Attackers tried to make their own schedule the law. Drums, work bells, rotating shifts at the rams and towers, set hours for felling timber and shaping it, fixed lines for carts that fed the carpenters and smiths. A camp that kept a rhythm could wear a wall down by routine alone. But routine bred hunger for interruption on the other side, and defenders knew it. Every sortie, every fire arrow at a lumber yard, every surprise on an approach road was aimed at the clock, not just the men. If you steal an hour from an engine crew, you steal a day from their week. Disease rode supply. Water lines crossed latrines if planning slipped. Animals fouled ground that men then slept on. A small cut from a splintered beam turned bad when the same knife cut bread an hour later. Camps were crowded, and crowded places trade more than stories. That is why delay favored walls. Each extra week meant more coughs, more fevers, more men who looked at the same mud and felt less like moving through it. The defense never needed to kill everyone. It needed to slow everyone until weather and sickness did the rest. Weather took sides without caring who asked. Rain made ground into glue and wheels into anchors. Wind carried sparks the wrong way. Cold turned rope stiff and fingers clumsy. Heat made tempers fast and water short. A trebuchet did not care about poetry. It cared about dry axles and a crew whose hands still obeyed. A tower did not fear brave men. It feared a ditch that yesterday was dirt and today was a pool. A plan that ignored weather was not a plan. It was a hope with wood attached. From the wall, defenders studied habits the way attackers studied stone. Which fires burned late? Which paths stayed busiest after dusk? Where did carts stack up when a gate in the camp failed? That knowledge let small groups pinch big lines. A sudden push at a woodpile did not just cost timber, it cost all the hours that timber represented. A night rush at a herd did not just scatter animals. It stole the next day's hauling, shoeing, and hauling again. In an art that worships engines, the simple theft of minutes often paid higher. Inside the ring, commanders staged power because steady shows kept their own men believing. To a line of towers moving forward, a ram finding a beat, a battery that answered the wall at the same hour every day. These were messages aimed inward as much as outward. Crews worked better when they felt the end approaching, even if it was still far. A quiet camp breeds doubt. A noisy camp feels alive. Noise was logistics in sound. Defenders answered with their own theatre, fires that glowed on the battlements at chosen times, sudden pause at the gate when rams drew near, stones that fell, in clusters on a rhythm so crews could not guess when to step. The wall taught the field to hesitate. Hesitation eats plans. Men who hesitate miss moments. A missed moment costs more than a broken beam because wood can be cut again. A gap in nerve takes longer to repair. Relief was the shadow on both calendars. Attackers counted bread, hoping no banners would appear on a ridge. Defenders counted barrels, hoping they would. Rumors ran faster than scouts. A rider seen at distance became a march. A dust plume became a host. A signal fire beyond a hill became a promise. That is why both sides kept eyes as busy as hands. If a city believed help was near, it held. If a camp believed none would come, it pushed. In sieges, belief about the future paid as much as food did. Communication was simple because it had to be. Horns, flags, runners, chalk. Anything more elaborate broke under mud and fear. Orders that survived were orders a tired man could remember after a bad night. 2 beats, then move. Blue cloth means left. If the bell fails, go at third light. On the wall, the language matched. Pour at the second knock. Loose at the third ladder. Cleverness that could not be repeated by cold hands did not belong. Night did not belong to one side. Darkness carried dogs and drunks. Echoes that traveled too far and fires that either betrayed you or froze you. Most useful movement lived at the edges, dawn and dusk, when tired men called it done and fresh men had not yet taken full hold. A sortie at grey light could look like fog until it was already near the engines. A repair party at the last glow could look like shadows until a wall's voice came down in hot sand. Both sides learned that the city breathes at the edges of the day. Morale rode on small things. Bread that wasn't stone, water that didn't stink, a word from a commander who walked the muddy lanes instead of shouting from a dry tent, a promise paid on time. The opposite cut twice as deep. Delayed coin bit harder than a dull blade. A captain who hid made men do the same. In a craft that drains patience, people stared at leaders to borrow some. If they saw it, they gave another hour to the ropes. If they didn't, they watched the ropes and thought about home. Wood and iron were counted like lives. A lost wheel was not a circle. It was a week. A snapped rope was not a strand. It was a field's worth of hemp. A burned roof over a ram was not planks. It was all the hands that had shaped them. That is why defenders aimed at parts as often as people. A dead man is replaced by a man who steps forward. A broken axle is replaced by a day that never comes back. Ground chose routes for the living and the dead. Marsh forced approaches. Rock forced saps to bend. Streets inside a city forced defenders to decide which houses would burn if a gate failed. Everyone pretended the fight was about courage. In truth, it was about where wheels could roll and where they could not, where fires could be fed and where they would gutter out, where a body could carry a load and where it would sink to the knee and curse. Courage matters at the margin. The margin is set by dirt. Silence had a cost. A camp that went quiet too long told a wall it could rest. Work stopped at night because work had to stop sometimes, but smart commanders salted the dark with small noises that promised tomorrow's pain. A beam dragged, a hammer tapped, a horn tested and put away. The wall slept worse when it heard those sounds. Poor sleep makes poor aim. Poor aim makes brave men doubtful. Doubt shortens stands. Inside the city, sameness could save or doom. Routines kept people fed and torches lit. Routines also made it easier for the outside to guess when to strike. A gate that always opened at the same bell and closed at the same bell tells a story. Defenders who learned to stagger their own steps wrote a different ending. The same holds in reverse. Attackers who moved at the same hour taught the wall to be ready. Breaking your own pattern cost comfort but bought surprise. Surprise was cheaper than blood. Economy underpinned everything. A siege ate money. Pay, fodder, food, timber, iron, rope, pitch. Cities bled money too. Markets staggered. Stores were rationed. Craft stalls turned to repair shops or went dark. The longer it went on, the more both sides wanted it over for reasons that never reached a chronicle. A ledger can kill faster than a lance, because a ledger decides which cart rolls and which does not. The cart that does not roll delivers a gap somewhere else no one planned for. The show never stopped because the audience never did. People in the town watched from windows, roofs, and alleys. People in the camp watched from lines and fires. Stories formed while stones flew. Their tower is sinking. Our ram is faster today. Their men are quiet. Ours sang last night. Those stories either held a line together or loosened it. That is why commanders repeated certain scenes until they stuck. The parade of engines, the chant at the rams, the bright line of shields moving as one. Repetition builds belief. Belief builds work. Work builds cracks. When the end came, it usually did not look like a legend. A section of wall gave way and men who were ready used it. Or a gate opened, because people inside believed nothing waited for them but worse. Or an army on the ridge turned rumor into fact, and the ring had to lift because there was no bread for a second fight. The end felt sudden because time hides its own teeth. The truth is that endings are built by the same hours that felt pointless while you lived them. Gunpowder shortened some parts and left the skeleton in place. A cannon could do in an afternoon what a frame and counterweight once needed days to attempt. But powder did not bake bread, shoe horses, drain ditches, or cure fever. It did not stop rain. It did not quiet a camp that had started to tell itself the wrong story. The math stayed. Supplies, sickness, weather, nerve, time. New noise, same clock. So the plain outline holds. Siege is not a duel. It is a schedule. Engines are tools for pressure. Camps are factories that run on routine. Walls are platforms that trade height and heat for minutes. Disease, weather, and rumor are the silent partners that sign every plan. If you want to know who wins, watch who keeps their clock and who loses it. The stones matter. The hours matter more. When people imagine a medieval assassin, they often picture a figure in sleek black garments and a dramatic hood that flows in the night air. The truth in the source is far plainer and much rougher. You blended in by looking like everyone else, threadbare, unwashed, and a bit unsteady from exhaustion or old injuries. There was no tailored cloak waiting in a chest. You wore whatever you could scavenge. A monk's robe that didn't fit, a guard's tunic that still kept the last owner's smell, or common rags that wouldn't draw a second glance. If anything looked suspicious, it wasn't the outfit but the way you kept fussing with a belt to hide a wrapped knife. That was the uniform. Masks didn't save you either. There was no fashionable face covering that past inspection. Covering your face tended to make you look diseased or dangerous, which only made doors close faster. If someone asked who you were, you needed a role on the spot. Some humble functionary or handyman whose job no one wanted to talk about. The real challenge started after you got through the door. Households remembered faces. A clumsy mistake with a chamber pot or not knowing the cook's cat was enough to get you noticed. Disguises bought a few minutes of confusion at best. Then you had to vanish or talk your way out without a misstep. Wigs weren't a fix either. There were no theatrical transformations, just dirt rubbed into the skin and hope no one looked too closely. You also worked alone. There was no handler whispering into your ear, no trusty partner with a crossbow waiting on a roof, no alchemist in a hidden cellar. Talk of orders or guilds was mostly tavern lore. Secrecy was survival, and every extra person who knew your name shortened your life. Even clients often didn't know who you really were, and if they did, you ensured it wouldn't help them find you later. Friends asked questions. Lovers noticed scars, blood spots, and the knife under your pillow. Thieves might share a bowl of stew. They wouldn't share heat with someone who attracted mobs and torches. So you sat alone back to the wall, barely drinking, never sleeping 2 nights in the same bed, and never offering a name that traced back to you. Failure was not a quiet discomfort. It was a spectacle. If your hand shook, if the target turned unexpectedly, if a child entered the room and you hesitated, the attempt collapsed. Then the transition was instant, from shadow to quarry. Notices spread. Guards who had been lazy became eager, and a crude likeness of your face multiplied across archways and tavern doors. The person who hired you no longer saw an asset. They saw a threat, someone who might be questioned and forced to talk. There were no do-overs. You had a single chance. Missing it meant a grim end that was meant to teach by example. Success didn't bring relief. If the strike landed and the room stayed quiet, the work wasn't finished. It had just become an escape job. City gates would be shut. Guards would be stationed at crossings and alleys. Checkpoints meant every set of eyes looked for a stranger who moved a little too quickly. The only reason to survive was planning the retreat long before the approach. Alternate routes, a fallback disguise, a boatman who asked no questions. The payer would not meet you with gratitude in a lamplit corner. The payer would often disappear. An assassin who has proved he can get in is the most dangerous person to the one who paid for it. Even a paid-in-full outcome still planted a target on your back and forced you to start again somewhere far away, under a different name. Superstition made everything worse. In many places, people didn't think of a silent killer as a man using craft. They saw a figure touched by curses. Rumors flourished, shape-shifting, vanishing unless sprinkled with holy water, breathing death through walls. Tools became suspect. A dagger must be forged somewhere unholy. A vial must be witchwork. That fear didn't protect you. It triggered panics. A sudden death, illness, accident, a bone caught in the throat, could be blamed on the quiet stranger at the edge of the market. Then bells rang and crowds formed with torches and stones. Even carrying harmless herbs or foreign coins could be enough to have someone shout sorcerer, and the question would be settled by fire rather than talk. Poison, so tidy in tales, was unreliable in practice. Your supplies were plants, mushrooms, minerals, or animal secretions, mixed without precision. A pinch too little produced only nausea and suspicion. A pinch too much endangered the handler. Kitchens were hard to breach, and elite tables had ritual defenses. Tasters, blessings, and sometimes even a dog to sniff or sample before the plate reached a seat. Even when the drop worked, timing fought you. Hours or days might pass before symptoms struck, and if the victim recovered, the herbalist, who had been around, would be blamed. If caught, you weren't granted a quick end. You were pressed until every plot was confessed, whether it was true or not. Recognition was not the reward. A figure who removes a tyrant in the night is not given a monument. Your name wasn't meant to appear in any record. Clients wanted distance. The fewer who knew, the safer they felt. You didn't sign anything. You didn't keep trophies. You didn't tell stories at a table. If a name escaped into rumor, it became a loose end that someone would cut. The likely outcomes were either a plain box and an unmarked hole, or if things went wrong, a head displayed with an unfriendly label. If your name lingered at all, it was to scare others. A whispered warning not to cross whoever commanded the guards. The erasure was the point. Trust was the most expensive luxury, and the one you could not afford. Once the deed was done, the person who hired you calculated risks, and you stood at the top of that list. The cleanup might be a refusal to meet, a denial you existed, or a second contract aimed at you. Sometimes 2 killers were hired at once, the second to follow the first. Any thought of leverage, threatening to name names, was a quick route to the gallows or worse, because prominent men didn't bargain with someone who had shown he could strike without warning. Even in the rare event of honorable payment, you assumed you were watched and sketched by someone whose job was to study how you walked. There was no retirement. If you managed to live, you carried too many secrets and too many debts. Those who wanted you gone didn't send letters. They sent people. So you changed your name again, picked a remote place where questions weren't popular, and pretended to be someone ordinary. A seller of herbs, perhaps, or a former guard with a lingering limp. The habits never left. You sat where you could see the door. You hid a small blade beneath a loose board, next to coins you didn't touch because of what they reminded you of. Knock at the wrong hour and every muscle tensed. Sleep turned shallow. Laughter felt risky. The life narrowed to watching and waiting. Strip away the glamour and the job looks like this. Hard poverty, constant exposure, and near-certain isolation. You arrived in a town with the wrong expectations, imagining control, then discovered the target had shifted lodgings, the gate watch had sobered up, and the stable help had traded your name for bread. A misread glance and you struck the wrong person. A single witness recognized you from a chapel. Then the chase began over slick stones, through mud, past flapping birds and carts, until a guard with a grudge took you down. If you escaped that, there was the empty path after. No friends to hide you. No patron eager to claim you. Just the weight of each act and the narrowest chance that your last days would pass quietly under another identity. The tools weren't miracle devices. There were no hidden blades that snapped into your wrist, no folding crossbows slipped into boots, no smoke that erased footprints. What you had was what you could carry without noise. A small blade you hoped wouldn't break, a cord if you knew how to use it, and improvisations if the kit failed, a shard of tile, a nail, a heavy buckle. You hid gear in hems or shoes, and prayed metal didn't clink on stone. You didn't spend evenings tinkering or upgrading. You hoped the edge stayed true for one more job. If it didn't, you adapted or died. Targets weren't random townsfolk. They were guarded and wary people. Nobles, prelates, officers, who had motives to fear knives and arrange their surroundings accordingly. Patrols ran in patterns you had to memorize. Murder holes and narrow slits made approach costly. Moats and dogs and door bars delayed you, while eyes watched from angles you couldn't cover. Staff noticed unfamiliar faces. Security was not just steel. Gossip traveled faster than you could. Even a banquet was not an opening but a maze. Yes, there was wine, but there were also performers and jesters who actually noticed the crowd, and scores of witnesses who would remember the stranger. Isolation wasn't only a tactic, it was the price. You couldn't tell anyone how the work felt, or how few quiet hours you had. If you tried to explain, people either disbelieved you or decided you were unsafe to be near. So you kept the past in silence, carried the marks alone, and moved before anyone had time to connect a face to a rumor. The only way to endure was to become a habit of disappearance. No attachments, no routines, no second nights. If you had to talk, you did it for pay, and even then you used a name you wouldn't keep. Put together. The portrait is consistent and bleak, not trained mystics in secret schools, not elegant cloak and dagger artists with grand exits, but desperate, under-equipped workers who learned by surviving the previous attempt. The career didn't offer admiration, and it didn't offer safety. It offered the constant possibility of violent ends, the unpredictability of poisons and people, and the certainty that if you succeeded brilliantly, your reward was to forget your own name before others erased it for you. What awaited at the end was not applause but quiet, so thorough a quiet that no one even remembered to ask where you went. Watching was bread, not spice. You ate it daily. You changed your gait, your lane, your shoulder for the bundle. You stopped to tie a shoe and used the hinge of a door or the gloss of a picture to read a room without turning your head. You counted how many turned when you paused, and which faces leaned back from a window instead of out. A watcher cares more about you than about the question you just asked. That is the edge you look for. If you thought you had a tail, you did not run. Running invited nets. You bought a pair, dropped one, and watched whether the tail stepped or waited. You took a lane with 2 exits and left by the one that made no sense for your stated errand. If the person followed, you had a problem. If they broke off, they were on their own task. Most tails prefer the main road. Side paths force them to say who they are. Routes were habits you had to break on purpose. You went out by the north gate for a week, and then used the river stairs at dawn. You switched the side you carried your bundle. You left a mark only you could read and watched if it moved before you returned. You spent a minute under an eave to see if anyone spent that minute with you. Patterns make comfort. Comfort makes capture. Meetings were chosen so that the place explained itself. You became the person with answers at a posted city map. So strangers found you first, and it felt normal when you asked 2 short questions back. You mended a net at the same bridge often enough that repetition became ordinary. Work is the best cover because it is noise people accept. Why are you here? Dies when a job is visible and low status. When hands must meet, you used brush passes in crowds that had their own reason to exist. Guild lines, tax queues, holy processions. Fingers drilled so the transfer worked without eyes. Practice used worthless cargo until failure was no longer an option. If someone asked why you stood close, you pointed at the reason everyone accepted and moved on. Dead drops were for days when eyes were too many. You used churn, ash heaps, scrap baskets, wood bins, sacks of lime. You hid notes in containers no one wanted to keep. Cracked pots, oily rags, stale bread wrapped twice. You marked the spot with changes that looked accidental. A knot moved a finger's width, a splinter left proud, a single nail dropped head up. You never left the same weight twice. Patterns give birth to watches. Signals match their ground or they failed. Chalk works on dry brick, not on wet oak. A thread will sit on a nail head, not on smooth doors. A wax dab holds in winter and droops in summer. You tested marks in the same light and weather they would face. If the city swept the alleys at dawn, your sign set at night had to survive a broom. Birds pull at bright bits. You did not use bright bits. Nature checks better than any guard. Night was not your friend. Night carried dogs, drunks, echoes that travel too far, and firelight that throws faces into door frames. You preferred edges of the day, dawn and dusk, when work noise covered motion and eyes were not yet sharp. If you had to work in full dark, you added time for silence. A latch that seems soft at noon shouts at midnight, because the city holds its breath between bells. Compartment was not an ideal. It was survival. The person who knew the key did not know the bell. The one who set the bell did not know the exit. The watcher in the lane did not know faces. It wastes time, people would say. It saves lives, you answered, because tongues are breakable. Fear makes mouths talk. Drink makes boasting. Tired minds misremember. You separated facts so that one damaged piece could not hand over the whole job. You paid people the way you wanted them to be seen. Poor. A copper folded into cloth, not dropped on a table. A seat by a warm oven, not a purse that shines. A bundle of wood left where the neighbor would blame the wind. If a source is seen getting rich, they are seen getting help, and help makes enemies. Thin lines are safer. Sources failed in predictable ways. Some guessed when they had no news, because they feared delivering nothing. You made it safe to say nothing today by paying small sums for silence that protected you from acting on lies. You praised restraint when it guarded the task. You did not turn every meeting into a demand. People remain accurate when boredom is not punished. You tested new mouths with facts you could check by yourself in a day. The hour ash barrels roll. How many pigs were slaughtered last week? Which minor gate had the roster you could look at twice? Right twice buys a third question. Wrong once forces a decision. Did they guess, did they lie, or did they mishear? Guessers need training. Liars need distance. The mishearing needs simpler tasks. Writing was dangerous and necessary. If you must write, you wrote like a tradesman. A list of nails, each nail a person. Barley, each bushel a cart. Numbers that look like weights mark times. You carried a decoy page with dull notes, so a search would end when it found something boring. Best was to memorize. Better was to burn. Worst was to carry pride in ink. Children were eyes adults ignored. You used them with care, or you did harm you would see again later. You paid them with sweets for games that matched your needs. Count the red caps between bells. Tell me if 2 carts block the alley twice in a week. You kept them clear of doors and beer and never gave them tasks that drew beatings. A child taught to spy becomes an adult with a loose line to truth. That kind of harm returns. Verification killed more agents than collection. People raced to deliver. You slowed down. Before you risked a person at a gate at midnight, you walked that lane twice in day and once at dusk. You counted loose stones you could trip on. You checked for dogs. You smelled for vinegar. That means a guard cleaned a wound there and might still be on the route. You dirtied a finger on a wall and looked for your own print the next day. You were hunting for other eyes. Information spoiled at different speeds. Prices turned fast. Orders faster. Walls slow. You matched the clock you worked on to the clock of the world. If a march was in 3 days, you spent hours on barracks and bread, not on nobles' private affairs. If a marriage in spring mattered, you lived the winter with servants and tailors. Apples when the need was grain was how people died. Cover identities earned questions you could answer. A tallyman asks sex. A messenger asks where a lord will be. A bead seller asks when the festival sets stalls. You trained enough to pass the craft you wore. A knife grinder who could not sharpen a blade betrayed himself in a minute. Hands tell faster than tongues. Eavesdropping was not crouching under a window. It was sharing air others forgot they shared. You sat near the teamster people ignore. You stood behind the clerk reading names to a room. You knelt 2 rows back from a captain who praised too loud. You watched hands because hands glance at what matters. You caught a name in a look and finished it later. You measured gossip against tasks. Noble sins, hidden coins, secret births, most of it wasted time. You kept what moved carts, opened doors, shifted guards, delayed signals, or changed prices. Leverage had to be used like a knife kept in cloth, with care and rarely. Used wrong, it turns into noise that ruins your clock. When you had to move words far, you used people who already crossed the distance. Pilgrims, fish traders, tinkers. Minstrels were last choice. They draw eyes. You taught a phrase that could be true and still mean what you needed. The bridge sings tonight. can be a tune for a show and a signal about planks at dusk. Simple survives. Clever gets proud and fails. Orders up the chain carried line, doubt, and consequence. Eastgate opens early on market days. 2 of 4 guards drink before dawn. Latch sticks when the night is wet. Window above the porter has a loose bar. Confidence 3 of 5. You did not oversell, and you did not pretend the bell would not crack, the pig would not be loose in the lane, or the captain would not wake early because his wife was sick. You built options. One path is a wish, not a plan. Counter-surveillance on the wall mirrored yours. Defenders staggered torch rounds, added dogs where echoes hung, and trained the fool to watch. You adapted by moving your checks into their checks. You tied your shoe near windows, because that is where they lean back. You paused in the same shadow a dog prefers, and counted whether the dog moved. Their learning forced yours to stay fresh. Signals, drops, passes, and checks worked only as long as you accepted a smaller truth. The job pays patience, not glory. You removed reasons to be remembered. You kept answers short and shaped like work. You traded neat tools for dull scraps that did not write stories when dropped. You made yourself a hinge with grease on it, useful, quiet, and forgotten the moment a door closed. In the end, counter-surveillance and compartments are not clever decorations. They are the frame that holds everything else. Without the frame, one tail pulls a whole plan apart, one mouth hands over the shape of it, and one lucky guess puts names on a list you cannot escape. With it you keep movement small, errors local, and damage survivable. That is the difference between working tomorrow and becoming the example someone else uses to train a room. Catapults were not only about smashing stone, they staged messages. Generals lobbed fear along with rocks, corpses to spread disease, severed heads to shatter morale. And for the first time cities learned their walls had to endure what fell from the sky as well as what pushed at the gate. The machines were heavy, skill-hungry, and picky about ground, but set right. They battered a town from a safe distance and made thick walls a different problem. The early Greek devices gave the pattern, and Rome turned it into a system. Ballistae threw great bolts. Stone throwers hurled boulders. Crews packed them down to travel, rebuilt them on site, and sent 60-pound shots through wood and unlucky men. The trick was the twist. Cords of sinew wound hard, storing force that flung javelins, stones, even flame over long ground. Portable artillery for professional armies. Spectacle and physics working together. If catapults were clever, the trebuchet was the king. It announced itself. Towering frame, long arm, counterweight, and sling. Gravity made into a weapon. Raise, drop, whip, and the payload lifted in a high arc that did more than chip parapets. It reached courtyards, barracks, stores inside the walls. The effect was precise and predictably brutal, the kind of controlled destruction that made cities hold their breath between shots. Origins ran from traction models, men hauling the arm, in early Chinese use, to the later counterweight form that spread through Byzantium and the Muslim world and then across Europe. Once that design took root, castles and crusades alike learned what a well-built machine could do. 300-pound stones hurled 300 meters. Furniture-sized rocks pulverizing towers and morale at once. Not only stone flew, burning pitch, lime to blind, even insults wrapped around rocks. Stories kept pace with machines. At Stirling, Warwolf loomed so large the garrison offered to yield before it fired. The king refused just to see it work. That was the point. A weapon that broke more than stone, it broke choices. The frame said, "Your walls mean nothing," and the city believed it. Rams, meanwhile, stayed the ground truth brute, housed in wheeled frames under wet hides, iron-tipped and lethal when crews kept the beat. Greeks refined, Romans perfected, Ares slung in chains under great sheds, thunder rolling along a gate until hinges and hearts went slack. A stalled ram died. A steady one felt unstoppable. Wood and bodies moving together until the door forgot its job. Together these engines mapped the siege into layers. Tactician at distance, king over the wall, brute at the gate. Spectacle was not decoration. It was a second payload. Rocks cracked parapets. Dread cracked people. Under the noise ran the same old question, how to break what was built to be unbreakable from afar, and the same answers, range, rhythm, and a show that made surrender feel like sense. A siege was not a single trick. It was a stack of simple pressures that added up. Distance hit stone. Height poured heat. Ground betrayed foundations. Gates took a beat they could not ignore. Camps turned wood and grain into routine. Gossip carried faster than horns. Fear did work that metal could not do by itself. None of these parts looked grand on their own. Together they bent choices until one side accepted an end it did not want. Think in clocks, not heroics. The outer clock was engines and work teams. The inner clock was stomachs, sleep, and nerve. If the outer clock kept time and the inner clock of the enemy slipped, you moved forward without needing a single great moment. If your outer clock missed beats and your own inner clock sagged, you lost even with fine machines. The craft was keeping your hours and stealing theirs. At the wall, physics and habit met. Murder holes were not decorations. They were planned funnels where heat and weight did the talking. Pouring scalds was not rage. It was schedule. Lift the lid, tip at the second knock, close, reload, breathe. Stones and beams had their own rhythm. Crews learned to drop on the third ladder, not the first, because the third caught men already committed on the rungs, with nowhere to go but down. The routine was the weapon. The routine turned a section of wall into a place where time ran against the people climbing. At the gate, rams played the same game with sound. One thump meant noise. 50 meant inevitability. Wet hides and thick roofs kept the crew alive long enough to turn muscle into a metronome. The beat taught hinges to loosen, and taught defenders to imagine the door opening before it did. A bad crew died under oil and rocks. A steady crew made the city count with them. Counting stole courage. Courage thins before wood fails. Over the wall, towers turned distance into touch. They moved slowly, and that slowness fooled people who only watched. The slowness trained crews and trained fear at the same time. An inch gained today became a body's length tomorrow, and one morning the gangway was near enough that men on the parapet were staring into eyes they did not want to see. Panic grows fastest at arm's length. That was the purpose. Deliver arm's length. Under the earth, saps traded speed for certainty. A tunnel did not care how brave anyone felt. If the props burned and the roof went, a wall dropped because gravity kept its promises. Countermining was the honest reply. Listen, dig toward the tap. Fight in heat and smoke. Neither side liked that work. Both did it because not doing it meant trusting stone too much. Trust in stone failed often enough to kill the habit. Engines at distance did more than chip stone. They carried messages. Catapults threw disease and dread as well as rocks. Trebuchets made cities live between thumps. A pause became a weapon. A new shot became a sentence that said the next shot would be worse. People who think only of broken towers miss the main effect. The main effect was men on battlements waiting for a sound. Inside the ring, camps that looked like chaos were factories. Trees became frames. Frames became movement. Movement became doors that forgot their job. Carts became food. Food became hours. Hours became pressure. The line runs that way every time. If carts stopped, hours vanished. When hours vanished, pressure slackened and a wall that should have failed did not. Defense did not need miracles. It needed delays that cut supply into pieces small enough that men believed they could stand another day. Disease and weather joined whichever side respected them less. Mud turned wheels into lies. Cold turned rope hard and hands clumsy. Heat turned water into an argument men lost. Camps forgot this at their cost. Cities forgot it and starved on clear days, because clear days do not carry grain by themselves. The craft was not beating nature. It was not betting against it. It was measuring and working inside what the ground and air allowed. Information was always noisy. Most of what you heard was wrong in some way. The answer was not purity. It was triangulation. One mouth said soldiers marched east. Another said the east ditch had twice the laundry. A third said a brewer sold 4 barrels at the east barracks after dark. Together those wrong mouths drew a straight line. You acted on the line, not on the pride of having one clean source. Pride made graves. Lines made openings. Security lived in two ideas, compartment and counterwatch. No one carried the whole job in their head. Keys knew bells, not exits. Exits knew lanes, not faces. Faces knew hours, not keys. When a mouth broke, a plan bent instead of snapping. When a tail appeared, it learned only one piece and starved for the rest. That waste of time looked like a cost on good days. It became profit on bad ones. Economy sat under everything. Wood and iron were counted the way pay was. A lost axle was a week. A burned roof over a ram was 100 hands' effort gone in one scream. A snapped rope was a field of hemp turned into nothing. Defenders knew this. They aimed at parts because parts are harder to conjure than brave men. Attackers learned the same lesson on the wall. A smashed winch eats more future than a dead archer does, because the next archer steps forward. The next winch does not. Morale moved in details, not speeches. Bread that did not break teeth. Water that did not stink. A captain who walked the muddy lanes. Pay on time. An answer that did not insult intelligence. Men will push a machine when their hands trust the day. They will step back when pay is a rumor, or leaders speak from dry tents only. That step back is invisible to people who count only bodies. It shows up when the tool that needed 10 hands gets 7. Psychology was not decoration. It was half the weapon. The show of engines mattered, because eyes do not live in books. A tower moving forward told defenders a story about tomorrow. A line of shields moving together told attackers a story about themselves. The simple chant at a ram kept men on time. The glow on the wall at set bells said, "We are ready." Sometimes both stories were lies. Lies work if they buy another hour of work. Ritual protected and endangered. A city that opened the same gate at the same bell wrote its weakness in sound. A camp that worked the same hour taught the wall when to pour and when to sleep. Breaking your own habits cost comfort and bought surprise. Surprise was cheaper than blood. Leaders who liked comfort more than results got the outcomes they deserved, but the bill came due in other people's minutes. Rumor ran faster than scouts. A plume on a ridge became a relief force by noon. Harida vanished into trees and returned at evening, as 10 banners in every mouth. Belief altered choices before facts arrived. That is not stupidity. It is how people decide when they are tired and hungry. Commanders who fed their own side good stories and starved the other side of them did work that looks like nothing in a chronicle and everything in a ledger. Ledgers kill more often than lances. Entry and exit in houses under threat obeyed the same arithmetic. Disguises bought minutes. Minutes bought silence. Silence bought a clean act or a clean retreat. Poison existed, but kitchens have eyes and tasters have jobs. Chemistry rarely beat process. Doors told the truth with noise. A hinge that squeaked yesterday would betray you at midnight because the whole house was listening. The best plan removed opportunities for the house to tell stories about you. If a room wakes with a story, you did the wrong work. Punishment was theater, because theater trains faster than orders. Bodies on gates, heads above roads. Jokes on boards that were not jokes to anyone who had to fetch water under them. These did policy's work in a day. After spectacle, everyone noticed more for a while. Then people sagged back toward ordinary, because ordinary is how they live. The craft on both sides was to survive the sharp period without adding new spectacle, and then move when the edge dulled. Fear is tired work. Tired work gives openings back. Children saw what adults ignored. Dogs heard what men missed. Fools the kind paid to notice saw what pride hid. A plan that forgot these facts failed in small, stupid ways that became big, famous failures. A plan that used these facts with care turned noise into small levers. Small levers moved big doors when no one watched the hinge. Orders that worked fit in a cold hand. 2 beats, then move. Blue cloth means left. Pour on the second knock. Too much cleverness broke in mud and fear. You did not need elegance. You needed words that survived a bad night and still made 2 groups of men act together at dawn. That is why simple armies beat complicated ones in sieges that lasted. The complicated armies made neat mistakes. Night was not magic. Night carried dogs, drunks, and echoes. Dusk and dawn paid better. Work noise covers motion. Eyes are slow to sharpen at edges. If you must move at full dark, you added time for silence because sound grows teeth when a city holds its breath. Men who learned that lived longer. Men who treated night like a cloak were the reason captains told the same cautionary tales every winter. Verification saved more lives than daring did. People race to deliver facts. Slowing down feels wrong in a trade that pays for speed. Slow anyway. Count loose stones in a lane. Smell for vinegar where a guard cleaned a wound yesterday. Dirty a finger on a wall and check for your mark tomorrow. These little checks feel like nothing. They are the whole thing. The job is not the grand act. It is the removal of avoidable mistakes until only the small risk remains. Payment and trust never matched. Money arrived late when you needed it most. Safe conducts bent under new definitions of safe. That is why you kept second routes, second names, second buyers for the same news. Paranoia is a word used by people who have not been paid. Caution is the word used by people who still work after others quit or died. The line between them is the record you leave in other people's books. Gunpowder shortened some distances and ended some wars, but it did not end the system. Cannons did in moments what engines asked afternoons to attempt. They did not bake bread or hold back fever. They did not clear ditches or stop rain. The same clocks ran under the new noise. The same minds bent or held. People who think gunpowder erased patience misunderstand both gunpowder and patience. If you want a single clear rule for all of it, this is close. Remove reasons to fail that do not teach you anything. That is what steady crews do at a ram. That is what clean routines do on a wall. That is what good scouts do with triangles instead of single mouths. That is what compartments do when one person breaks. That is what quiet exits do in houses that love to talk. Courage you will still need, but courage is the spice. Bread is the work you do to keep errors small and survivable. The end of most sieges looked sudden. A section of wall gave way, and men who were ready used it. A gate opened because belief ran out before bread did. An army on a ridge turned rumor into fact. People later told stories about heroes. They skipped the hours that made the ending. The hours matter more. Engines matter, but hours decide what engines can do. A city that keeps its clock longer than the ring around it has a chance. A camp that keeps its clock longer than the wall it faces has a result. If you must carry one lesson away, make it this. Pressure wins when it is steady. One blow can be famous, but steady blows are the ones that bend will. The work is unglamorous, repetitive, and exact. You place weight where it counts, remove noise where it kills, and let time do the part no blade can. In that arithmetic, the first thing to fail is sometimes timber, sometimes stone, sometimes a man. The system does not care which it is. It only needs one. Start with noise and turn it into something you can use. That rule sits under everything. Markets, doorways, ferries, church steps stand where people have reasons to stop and bigger reasons to keep moving. Ask for less than you want so mouths stay loose. 10 small answers line up into a map no one meant to give you. If you cannot place a detail on a clock, bell, delivery, fast day, guild hour, do not trust it yet. Anchors first, conclusions later. Build truth by triangles, not by pride. One witness makes a story. 3 witnesses, each wrong in a different way but pointing to the same line, make a plan. A brewer says soldiers moved east at dusk. A carter sells barrels to the east barracks after dark. Laundry doubles at the east ditch at dawn. None holds a muster roll, all draw the same arrow. Move on the arrow, not on the desire to carry one perfect fact. Verification beats speed. Before you risk someone at midnight, walk the lane twice in daylight and once at dusk. Count loose stones, note dogs. Smell vinegar where a guard cleaned a wound yesterday. Smudge your wall and look for your own print tomorrow. These checks feel small because they are small. They keep you alive because the mistakes they catch are the big kind, the ones that announce you to a house that loves to talk. Compartment saves what daring ruins. Keys no bells, not exits. Exits no lanes, not faces. Faces no hours, not keys. Fear breaks tongues, drink grows boasts. Tired minds rot memory. When one mouth fails, a plan should bend, not snap. Spending time to divide knowledge looks wasteful to people who have never watched a whole job die, because one eager soul wanted to be useful at the wrong table. Signals must fit their ground, or they fail. Chalk for dry brick, thread for nailheads, wax when cold holds, not when summer droops it. Test markings in the same light and weather the plan will face. If alleys are swept at dawn, anything you set at night must live through a broom. Birds pull at bright bits. Do not use bright bits. Nature is a sterner inspector than any guard, and it never looks away. Writing is both necessary and dangerous. If you must write, write like work. Lists that look like nails and barley, weights that are really times. Carry a dull decoy so a search ends early. Memorize when you can, burn when you must. Never carry pride in ink. The paper you keep to feel clever is the rope someone else needs to pull the whole line loose. Cover must earn the questions you need to ask. A tallyman can ask sacks. A messenger can ask appointments. A bead seller can ask when the festival sets stalls. Learn a craft well enough that your hands pass. Hands reveal faster than tongues. Never pretend to sharpen a blade if you cannot sharpen a blade. One pull on a whetstone will tell on you before your mouth starts the lie. Work where the place explains repetition. Mend a net at a bridge. Tend a stone in a graveyard. Stack wood behind a bakehouse. A small coin for visible low-status labor answers the first suspicion, "Why are you here again?" before it forms. The best meeting is the one no one names as a meeting, because it looks like two errands crossing paths and dying in the same breath. Choose edges over darkness. Night is not a cloak. It magnifies sound, draws dogs and drunks and frames faces in firelight. Dusk and dawn carry work noise and sleepy eyes. If you must act at full dark, add time for silence, because a latch that whispers at noon will shout at midnight when a city holds its breath between bells. Move when others are changing watches or trimming lamps. The world is busy then and remembers less. Pay so that payment cannot be seen. A copper folded in cloth, not a gleam on a table. A reduced rent. A seat by a warm oven on cold days. A bundle of wood left where the wind can be blamed. A source who looks richer looks helped. Help makes enemies. Enemies make noise. Thin lines are safer because thin lines hide. Make no news safe to deliver. People guess when they fear showing up empty. Pay small sums for silence that protects you from acting on lies. Praise restraint that shields a task. If every meeting is a demand, you are training mouths to invent. In this work, boredom, not drama, deserves the bonus. Sort sources by failure type. If they guess, teach. If they lie, distance. If they mishear, simplify. Test with facts you can check in a day. Ash barrels hour, pigs slaughtered, minor gate rosters. 2 right answers by a 3rd question. 1 wrong answer forces a judgment you cannot delay. Measure gossip against tasks. Noble sins and hidden coin are loud and often useless. Keep what moves carts, opens doors, shifts guards, delays signals, or changes prices. Leverage is a knife kept in cloth, used rarely and with care. Used wrong, it frays the quiet clock you need to live by. Move words with people who already move. Pilgrims, fish traders, tinkers. Minstrels draw eyes. Use them last. Teach phrases that can be true and still mean what you need. The Bridge Sings Tonight is a tune for a show and a note about planks. Cleverness that loves itself fails. Simple survives mud and fear. Report upward in a shape that can be used without you. Line doubt, consequence. East Gate opens early on market days. 2 of 4 guards drink before dawn. Latch sticks when nights are wet. Window above porter has a loose bar. Confidence 3 of 5. Do not oversell. Do not pretend bells never crack. Pigs never get loose or captains never wake early for reasons you cannot guess. 1 path is a wish. 2 paths are planned. On walls, routine is the weapon. Murder holes are not details. They are clocks. Lift, pour at knock 2, close, reload, breathe. Stones drop on the 3rd ladder. because the third traps men committed to climbing. Oil bites twice, once when it burns, again when it lights. Hot sand looks small and lasts long. Gravity never changes sides. Use it. At gates, steadiness wins. A ram is muscle converted to metronome. Wet hides, thick roofs, iron tips, tools to hold the beat under heat and hail. One thump is noise. 50 are inevitability. The rhythm loosens hinges and hearts together. Break the roof, stall the wheel, snap the rope. Parts die slower than men, and killing parts kills the schedule. Under earth, belief is nothing. Timber and flame are everything. Dig, prop, pack, burn, drop. If you hear picks, dig to meet them. Fight where air is short and the light eats breath. No one likes that work. Both sides do it because trusting stone without listening is how towers fall. Engines at distance carry payloads and messages. Catapults throw more than rocks. Trebuchets make cities live between the last thump and the next. The pause is a weapon. The unknown is a weapon. The sound of preparation, winches, ropes, counterweights is half the strike. People counting shots lose courage faster than parapets lose stone. Camps are factories, not campsites. Trees become frames, frames become movement. Movement becomes doors that forget their job. Carts become food, food becomes hours, hours become pressure. The chain always runs that way. Break any link and pressure sags. Defenders do not need miracles. They need delays that make a week of lumber into a log again. Disease and weather pick the side that respects them. Mud lies to wheels. Cold stiffens rope. Heat shortens tempers and water. Rain turns a path for towers into a pool, and a schedule into a wish. You cannot beat ground and air by hope. You must measure, then move inside the shape measurement allows. Morale lives in details leaders think beneath them. Bread that does not break teeth. Water that does not stink. Pay on time. A captain who walks the muddy lanes. A word that does not insult intelligence. Engines run on hours and hands. Hands run on trust. Lose trust and 10 hands become 7 when the frame needs 10. Ritual protects and exposes. A city that opens and closes at the same bells writes its weakness in sound. A camp that works the same hour teaches the wall when to pour and when to sleep. Break your own pattern. Pay in discomfort, save in blood. Commanders who love comfort more than outcomes get the outcomes comfort buys. Spectacle trains faster than orders. Bodies on gates, heads over roads, jokes painted on boards that are not jokes to water carriers. Policy written in display. After a scare, vigilance has a schedule. Everything is noticed, then less, then ordinary again, because ordinary feeds towns. Your craft is to survive the sharp period without adding new spectacle. Then move when the edge dulls. Fear tires. Tired fear gives openings back. Children, dogs, and fools matter. Children see what adults ignore and talk for sweets. Dogs hear what men miss and move before men notice. Fools, the kind paid to notice, say the unflattering truth out loud. Forget them, and your plan fails in a small way that becomes a big one. Use them carefully, and your small levers move big doors without drawing eyes to the hinge. Orders that work fit in cold hands. 2 beats, then move. Blue cloth means left. Pour on the second knock. If a command needs cleverness to remember, it will die in mud. Elegance belongs in books. Siege needs words that survive bad nights and still make men act together at dawn. Disguise buys minutes, not safety. A robe, a hood, a tunic, that is a ticket past the first doorway, not the second. Hands and feet betray you. Carry a bucket like you have before. Hold a ladle like someone who has burned a wrist. The fewer words you use, the longer you remain a fixture. If a room remembers you, you already failed. Poison exists, but process beats chemistry. Kitchens have eyes. Tasters have jobs. Cups are switched, plates swapped, dogs sniff first. If the second when a tester looks away never appears, the plan does not exist, vial or no vial. People love bottles in stories because bottles are neat. Rooms that know themselves are not neat. They are schedules with faces. Entry is the problem people like to think about. Exit is the one that kills them. Stairs echo. Echo invites nets. The prop you carried in, the bucket, the brazier, feels stupid until it is the only face that fits on the way out. Doors that open inward can be pulled as shields. Doors that open outward can knock a man off balance into 5 more seconds. Seconds become space. Space becomes distance. Distance beats men who know the hall better than you do. Payment and trust are not friends. Money arrives late when you need it most. Safe conduct bends under new definitions of safe. Keep second routes, second names, second buyers for the same truth. People who call that paranoia are not the ones who must still work tomorrow when the first buyer fails to be brave. Rumor outruns riders. A dust plume on a ridge becomes banners by noon. Belief changes choices before facts arrive. Feed your own side plain stories that survive daylight. Starve the other side of any story that holds their lines together. Ledgers kill more often than lances, because ledgers decide which cart rolls. The cart that does not roll creates a gap no speech can close. Gunpowder shortens parts, not the skeleton. A cannon does in moments what a frame and counterweight ask afternoons to attempt. It does not bake bread, drain ditches, shoe horses, or move carts through mud. The same clocks run under new noise. People who think powder replaced patience misunderstand both. If you need one working summary that travels, take this. Remove reasons to fail that teach you nothing. That is what steady crews do at Rams. What clean routines do on walls. What triangles do for truth. What compartments do for plans. And what quiet exits do for anyone who insists on entering rooms that do not want them. Courage is the spice. Bread is the work. Dull, exact, repeated until something that is not you breaks first. And when the end comes, do not look for legend. A section of wall gives way and ready men use it. A gate opens because belief runs out before bread. An army on a ridge turns rumor into fact, and the ring lifts because there is no food for a second fight. People will tell stories about heroes. What decided the day were the hours no one remembered to praise. For defenders on the wall before dawn, walk the crest once in silence. Touch every latch and hinge. Anything that squeaks at grey light will shout at midnight. Check murder holes with water, oil, and sand ready, in the order you plan to pour. Heat what needs heat. Keep one pot plain water for steam, and one for washing hands. Grease on fingers ruins grips. Count stones and beams laid for dropping. Set them where feet won't trip. Mark drop points with a thumbprint of soot. Only you understand. Rotate watches so no one stares past the same patch for an hour. Eyes stop working when they get bored. During pressure, pour on the second knock, drop on the third ladder. First strikes test. Second and third commit. Catch commitment. Don't chase bodies with pause. Reset the clock. Lift, tip, close, reload, breathe. Routine does the killing if you let it. Fire arrows at crews, not frames. Frames don't panic. Men do you aimstones at parts, winches, roofs, axle pins. Her broken part steals more future than a fallen man. After dark. Stagger torch rounds. Never let light move at a predictable pace. Add dogs where echoes hang. Salt the night with work noise, one beam dragged, one hammer tapped, a horn tested, then put away. Quiet cities grow brave. Do not lean from windows when you hear a pause outside. A pause is bait. For gate crews set up. Keep wet hides wet. Replace slings that shine with oil. Shine glows in firelight. Put extra wedges ready for hinges. Gates sag under fear. Wedges by breathing. Know which step booms under the portcullis. That sound is your alarm when rams arrive. Don't waste oil on the first 10 thumps. They are finding rhythm. Kill the rhythm, not the log. Rocks on roof edges, hooks for the chains, sand to blind. If you can't stop the beat, make the crew change hands. Pours time to swap over steel minutes, and minutes open space for other work. Keep one team for silence, the latch that always sticks, the hidden bar that swells in wet. Her silent fix can save an hour of shouting. For counterminers listening, ears to soil, feet bare on boards laid over ground. Boards carry taps better than dirt. Mark sounds with a chalk clock, short taps, pick. Long scrapes, brace. Hollow coughs, void. Draw arrows. Meet arrows, meeting. Carry short blades, not long. Tunnels punish reach. 1 torch per pair. 2 torches burn air too fast. Count breaths. Rotate men before counting gets hard. Fire eats props faster than pride does. If you can burn, burn. If you can't, sand the enemy flame, then shove. For camp quartermasters, bread and wood. A wheel is a week. Treat it like pay. Keep 2 spares hidden where theft is blamable on wind. Rope is fields of hemp made visible. Cover coils from dew. Wet rope lies. For every tree felled, count cart time, axe heads, wedges and hands. If you don't count hands, your engines won't move. Water and sickness. Never cross water lines with latrine lines. If you must, lift water over with boards you wipe every hour. A single knife serves wood, then food, then flesh. That is 3 fevers waiting. Issue rags and ash for scrubbing. Check for use. Tents don't make air. Spacemen if you can. If you can't, move fires away from sleeping lines. Morale. Pay on schedule visible to the line. A shouted coin day beats a whispered promise. A captain walking mud adds more hands to a frame than an order from a dry stool. Bread that doesn't break teeth is a weapon. So is clean water, for sortie leaders' targets. Clocks, not heroes. Wood piles, rope stores, wheel racks, fodder lines. 1 spark at rope steals more future than a skirmish won't. Hit while engines reload or crews rotate. Their rhythm is your door. Never fight where a wall can pour. Pull, strike, vanish. If the wall can tell a story about you, you stayed too long. Return. Count heads at the last shadow before the gate. Missing men become rumors that rot nerve. Send their names forward with the truth before the rumor arrives. For scouts and runners collection. Anchor every sighting to bells, carts or meals. After second bell, 3 carts before noon, while stew was ladled. Build triangles. What moved? What changed? Who paid? 3 wrongs pointed the same way beat 1 proud right movement. Change gates, shoulders and excuses daily. Carry something that answers why. Without a sentence, a cracked shoe, a net to mend, a pot with a chip you keep pointing at. If watched, do nothing interesting. Board watchers look away sooner. For infiltrators, houses not walls entry. Disguise buys minutes, not safety. Make those minutes carry work. Lamp oil for the north stair, bucket for the scullery, brazier to move. Hands tell. Learn the weight of a full pail and the dance around an oven door. If you don't have the movement, don't wear the role. Inside, kitchens are both shield and judge. If the cook doesn't know your face, every guard will loudly. If the cook knows it, half the house will ignore you. Testers are the clock inside the room. If your plan ignores them, you don't have a plan, you have glass in a sleeve. Exit. Stairs echo. Doors that open inward buy shields. Outward doors by 5 seconds of chaos. Seconds make space. Space makes distance. Leave where your face still fits. The prop that got you in sells your way out. For messengers and signals, dead drops. Use churn, ash, scrap, wood bins, lime sacks. Things no one loves. Never repeat weight or place on a pattern. Patterns breed watchers. Marks must belong to the ground. Chalk for dry brick, thread for nails, wax only when cold holds. Brush passes. Drill fingers until they don't look. Choose crowds with their own purpose. If questioned, point at the purpose and keep moving. Phrases. Teach words that survive daylight and truth. The bridge sings tonight can be both a tune and a plank warning. Clever dies proud. Simple lives muddy. For officers, both sides orders. Right for cold hands, 2 beats then move. Blue cloth left, pour on the second knock. If a man must admire your words to remember them, your order will fail in rain. 1 path is a wish. 2 paths are a plan. 3 paths are survival when bells crack. Spectacle. Use shows to train faster than rules. Parade engines within sight lines. Display consequences within traffic lines. Then stop before people harden into statues. Fear tires. Plan to move when it does. Ritual. Break your own pattern on a schedule you own. Comfort buys blood. A day of discomfort buys surprise. Surprise spends cheaper than men. For everyone who thinks night is a cloak, night carries dogs, drunks, echoes, and firelight on faces. Dusk and dawn carry work noise and slow eyes. Choose edges. If you must act at full dark, add time for silence. A latch that whispered at noon will shout at midnight, because the city holds its breath between bells. For people who think one great blow ends it. Steady wins. One blow is famous. Steady blows bend will. Rams teach it with beats, towers with inches, saps with smoke, walls with pause. Put weight where it counts and let time do the part no blade can. Verify more than you hurry. Count loose stones. Smell vinegar. Leave a smudge and check it tomorrow. Triangulate. Pride makes graves. Lines make openings. Red flags that mean stop and replan. You cannot anchor times to bells or meals. Your cover cannot answer the questions you must ask. Your signal depends on weather you did not test. Your plan needs silence from a room trained to make noise. Payment depends on someone whose courage you've only heard about. You are counting on night to hide sound. It won't. Quiet truths to carry. Gravity never changes sides. Use it from above. Fear it below. Chemistry rarely beats process. Tasters and switches eat clever vials. Parts are slower to replace than men. Aim at axles, winches, roofs, rope. Rumor outruns riders. Feed your side plane stories that survive daylight. Starve the other side of the ones that hold them together. Ledgers kill more often than lances. Wheels, wood, rope, pay. Count them or lose to someone who does. Children, dogs, and fools matter. They notice what pride ignores. Disguise buys minutes. Spend them on silence. Exit matters more than entry. If the room wakes with the story, you failed, even if the act landed. Final working line: remove reasons to fail that teach you nothing. Split knowledge so breaks bend, not snap. Keep orders short enough to live in cold hands. Count what turns into hours. Pour on the second knock. Drop on the third ladder and let steady work do what legend promises but never delivers. When something finally breaks, timber, stone, or a mind, the system takes the credit. That's the point. Section 14. Failure modes and red lines. Minimal change paraphrase. Failure rarely arrives as a surprise. It arrives by steps you decided to ignore. The first step is pattern. You keep the same gait, hour, shoulder excuse. Comfort feels like control, until it becomes a map someone else can read. Break your own habits on purpose, or they will be broken for you at a cost you cannot choose. The second step is speed without checks. You rush to deliver news and skip anchors. Bells, deliveries, rosters, prices. You act on one proud witness, instead of 3 wrong ones that point the same way. Pride feels quick. Triangulation feels slow. Slow lives. Pride writes names on boards. The third step is chemistry over process. You plan around a vial and forget kitchens have eyes and tasters have jobs. You rely on the single second when a tester looks away and never prove that second exists. Rooms beat bottles. If your plan needs silence from a room trained to make noise, it is not a plan. The fourth is gear over parts. You think men matter more than axles, winches, roofs, rope. You hit crews instead of the pieces that steal future hours. Parts are slower to replace than bodies. Time is harder to buy than bravery. Aim where replacement is slow. The fifth is night as a cloak. You trust darkness to hide sound. Dogs, drunks, echoes, firelit faces say otherwise. Edges of the day, dawn and dusk, carry work noise and slow eyes. If you must act at full dark, add time for silence. A latch that whispers at noon shouts at midnight when a city holds its breath. The sixth is orders that won't survive cold hands. Fancy words die in rain. Good orders fit into one tired breath. 2 beats, then move. Blue cloth left. Pour on the second knock. If a man must admire the phrasing to remember it, the order will fail when it counts. The seventh is whole plans in one head. You keep keys, bells, exits, faces together. Fear cracks tongues. Drink breeds boasts. Fatigue rots memory. Compartment feels wasteful on good days. It saves bodies on bad ones. When a mouth breaks, a plan should bend, not snap. The 8th is ignoring nature. Mud lies to wheels. Cold stiffens rope. Heat shortens tempers and water. Wind carries sparks the wrong way. A tower fears a ditch that turned to a pool more than it fears brave men. Measure ground and weather. Move inside what they allow. The 9th is believing rumor at the speed of fear. A dust plume becomes banners by noon. You change a plan for a story that hasn't paid daylight. Feed your side plane stories that survive checks. Starve the other side of the ones that hold them together. Ledgers kill more than lances. Watch which cart actually rolls. The 10th is entry without exit. You can get in with a tunic and a bucket. You cannot get out with a sprint on echoing stairs. The prop that felt stupid on the way in is your face on the way out. Doors that open inward buy shields. Outward doors buy 5 seconds. Seconds make space. Space makes distance. The 11th is using children carelessly. They see what adults ignore and talk for sweets. Never give them tasks that draw beatings. A child taught to spy becomes an adult with a loose line to truth. That harm returns. The 12th is treating spectacle like noise. Bodies on gates, heads above roads, loud punishments. These are policy, not decoration. After spectacle, vigilance has a schedule. All eyes, then less, then drift. Your craft is to survive the sharp period without making a new display, then move when fear tires. The 12th is treating spectacle like noise. Bodies on gates, heads above roads, loud punishments. These are policy, not decoration. After spectacle, vigilance has a schedule. All eyes, then less, then drift. Your craft is to survive the sharp period without making a new display, then move when fear tires. The 13th is confusing silence with safety. Quiet camps breed doubt. Dead silent nights make walls bold. Salt the dark with small work sounds, a beam dragged, a horn tested, then put away. On defense, don't lean from windows when the field goes quiet. Try pause is bait. Red lines are simple. If you cannot anchor times to bells or meals, stop and re-anchor. If your cover cannot answer the questions you need to ask, change the cover. If a signal depends on weather you did not test, do not use it. If payment depends on courage you have only heard about, assume it won't arrive. If the plan needs the house to forget itself for a minute, the plan is a wish. Corrections are simple too. Shorten orders. Make them live in one breath. Split knowledge. Make breaks bend. Aim at parts. Steal future hours. Verify slow. Triangulate before you move. Change your rhythm. Buy surprise with discomfort. Count what turns into time. Wheels, rope, wood, pay. In this work, famous blows are rare and expensive. Steady pressure is cheap and decisive. Put weight where replacement is slow. Remove reasons to be remembered. And let time do the piece no blade can. Something will break. Timber, stone, or a mind. If it is not you, the system worked. Plain rules mean little without a clock. Work sits on time. The same parts, collection, checks, pressure, exits, reshape themselves depending on whether you have a day, a week, or a month. What follows is the same method placed on 3 clocks, so you can see what fits and what must be cut. No myths, no extras, just sequence. A 1-day window, 24 hours. Hour 0 to 2, anchors before action. Fix 3 anchors you can trust. Bells, a delivery, a roster change. If you cannot anchor, you cannot act. Choose a cover that earns the questions you must ask. Tally, message, bead. If the cover cannot answer those questions without a speech, change it now. Mark one exit that fits your face on the way out. If you cannot mark an exit, there is no entry. Our 2 to 6, fast triangles. Build 2 short triangles only, movement, supply, watcher. Example, ram crew rotates at second bell. Woodpile restocked before noon. Dog moved to north stair. Verify each in the simplest way. Eyes, ears, 1 touch. Do not add a 4th check you cannot afford. If any single leg fails, discard the triangle. Pride is slower than failure. Do not carry it. Our 6 to 10, set signals that survive daylight, 1. Phrase that can be true in public and still carry meaning. Bridge sings, north lamp smokes, 1 mark. That belongs to the ground you'll use. Chalk on dry brick, thread on nail. Test it once against brooms, rain or hands. If it fails, drop it. No dead drops. Churn is too slow in a 1-day window. Use a brush pass inside crowds with their own reason to exist. Hour 10 to 14. Place pressure on parts, not people. If outside a wall, aim at winch, roof, axle, rope. A broken part steals tomorrow. A fallen man is replaced by a step forward. If inside a house, aim at the clock. Tester's door that sticks when wet. The guard's cup at the wrong hour. Chemistry does not beat process in a day. Hour 14:18, quiet route checks. Walk the exit once as the role you will wear. Carry the prop that buys your face on the way out. Count loose stones, note dogs, listen for a hinge that tells stories. Leave a smudge. Return an hour later. If it's gone, someone is cleaning where you plan to pass. Reroute, hour 18 to 22. Execute on edges, not at full dark. Choose dusk or dawn. Let work noise carry you. Full dark magnifies sound and breeds nets. If the second when the tester looks away does not appear, the plan does not exist. Do not force a minute from a room trained to make noise. Hour 22 to 24. Exit as furniture. Use doors that open the right way. Inward for shields, outward for 5 seconds. Seconds become space. Space becomes distance. Leave by the path where your prop still fits. Do not create a new story for a house that loves to tell them. A 1-week window, 7 days. Day 1, clocks and cover. Fix 5 anchors. Bells. Deliveries, guild hours, tax day, feast fast. Choose 2 covers that earn different questions. Tallyman plus messenger. Rotate them to break your pattern before anyone else does. Day 2, map habits with small work. Pick 2 places where repetition explains itself. Net at bridge. Wood behind bakehouse. Be seen doing low-status labor for small coin. Why are you here again? Dies in front of work. Day 3, build deep triangles. 3 triangles that point to 1 line. Movement, troops, supplies, routine, testers, lanterns. Weakness, sticking latch, loose bar. Verify each leg by a check you can repeat without pride. Count, smell, scrape. Replace any leg you had to feel twice. Day 4, counterwatch and drift. Change gaits, shoulders, pauses. Tie a shoe near windows. Read back faces that lean away. If you spot a tail, drag them into a choice that makes no sense for your errand. Tails prefer main roads. Side paths force them to say who they are. Day 5, quiet recruitment if required. Pay in forms that do not shine. Lowered rent, warm seat, wood blown by wind. Make no news, safe with small coin. People invent when emptiness is punished. Day 6, signals and storage. Establish 1 dead drop in churn, ash, scrap, lime. Never repeat weight or exact spot. Set 2 signals that match weather, wax for cold, thread for nail, chalk for brick. Test in the same light the plan will face. Day 7, edge execution and ready exits. Choose dusk or dawn per the house wall schedule you now know. 2 exits, main, your face fits, and sideways, your prop buys time. If a pause outside turns too clean, treat it as bait and slide to path 2. A 1-month window, 30 days, week 1. Intake without noise. Catalog hours that don't move. Gate opens, closes, choir, market, mill whistle. These are your spine. Place 2 small boring covers in rotation, grave tending, net mending. Become a fixture. Fixtures survive because no one remembers when they arrived. Week 2, inventory and parts. Count parts as if they were lives, wheels, winches, roofs, rope. Learn which replacements take weeks, not men. If defending, stack beams and stones where feet will not trip and mark drop points in soot, only you read. If attacking, note lumber paths, rope stores, fodder lines. These are your clocks to pinch. Week 3, compartment and practice. Split knowledge until breaks will bend. Keys no bells, bells no doors, doors no lanes, lanes no faces. Drill fingers for brush passes with worthless cargo until eyes are unnecessary. Dry run exits with props in full dress, stairs, doors, pauses. If any step depends on politeness from a stranger, rebuild it. Week 4. Theatre and morale. Plan a show that trains faster than orders, for either side. Parade engines within sight lines, or glow the battlements at chosen bells. Pay on time where hands can see coin. Bread that doesn't break teeth and water that doesn't stink are weapons. Week 4 edge days move once. Use weather and ground rather than wishing around them. Mud lies to wheels. Cold lies to rope. Heat lies to men's judgment. Execute with the smallest number of moving parts that still protects you. 1 path is a wish. 2, a plan. 3, survival when bells crack. Shared red lines, all clocks. If you cannot anchor time to bells, meals, or deliveries, stop. If your cover cannot answer the questions you must ask without a speech, stop. If your signal depends on untested weather or on night hiding sound, stop. If payment rests on courage you have only heard about, assume it will not arrive. If the plan needs a room trained to make noise to be silent, it is not a plan. Shared corrections. Shorten orders until they fit in one cold breath. Split knowledge so one mouth cannot hand over everything. Aim at parts, axles, roofs, winches, rope, because parts steal future hours. Verify slow triangles over pride, checks over stories. Change your rhythm on your schedule. Buy surprise with discomfort. Count what turns into time. Wheels, wood, rope. Pay why these phases stay inside the source. They turn the same plain rules, anchors. Triangles, verification, compartments, parts, spectacle. Edges overnight. Into sequence, not new theory. No new devices or chemistry. Only the same walls, gates, tunnels, heat, gravity, and routine. Same psychology. Show pressure, break will steadily. Let time do what blades cannot. Section 16, Roles and Responsibilities. Minimal change paraphrase. Plain work needs plain owners. Siege and infiltration look like machines and shadows from a distance. Up close they are jobs with names. Each role carries a small set of tasks that, done steadily, turn into pressure. None of these roles needs myth. They need clocks, parts, and habits that hold commanders, field and city. Your job is the clock, not the speech. You keep 2 timelines alive, the outer, engines, sorties, supply, and the inner, stomachs, sleep, nerve. You remove clever orders and write ones that live in cold hands. 2 beats, then move. Blue cloth left, pour on the second knock. You break your own patterns on purpose to buy surprise with discomfort. You stage shows, engines paraded in view, battlements glowing on chosen bells, because spectacle trains faster than rules. You pay on time where hands can see coin. Rumor rides faster than couriers, and will undo any plan you whisper from a dry stool. You count parts like lives, wheels, winches, roofs, rope, and aim your people at what steals future hours, not at whatever looks brave today. You know fear tires. You plan to move when the edge dulls. Quartermasters, you translate trees, metal, and animals into hours. A wheel is a week. Rope is fields of hemp you can trip on. A wet coil lies. A dry one works. You keep duplicate stores where theft can be blamed on wind. Water and filth must never cross. Boards wiped hourly lift water over latrine lines. Knives must not travel from wood to food to flesh without ash and rag in between, or one cut becomes 3 fevers. You space tents when you can. When you cannot, you push fires away from sleeping lines. You run the quiet parade that holds the whole plan together. Carts, fodder, shoes, pitch. If a ledger page breaks, a gate holds. Engineers and frame crews, rams, towers, engines. You build steady, not pretty. Rams become metronomes under wet hides. The beat loosens hinges and people together. Towers must move inches every day and keep moving in mud. The inch today becomes panic at arm's length later. Engines at distance, catapults, trebuchets, are messages as much as tools. The sound of preparation is half the strike. Winches creak, ropes grind, counterweights land. The city lives between thumps. You protect parts more than men because parts replace slow. You keep roofs soaked, axles greased, pins spare, slings matte, never shining. Rhythm is your true weapon. If the beat dies, the machine is a log again. Sappers and counterminers, your ground is dark and honest. You dig, prop, pack, burn, drop. Timber tells the truth. Flame decides the hour. When you hear picks, you meet sound with sound. Board under feet for better listening. Chalk clocks for taps and scrapes, arrows that point the way. Blades are short. Torches are few because air leaves early. You count breaths and rotate men before counting becomes hard. You accept that no one will sing about this work because the air would not let them. You do it because trusting stone is how towers fall. Wall crews, defenders. Your wall is a clock, not a view. Murder holes are funnels with schedules. Lift, pour on the second knock, close, reload, breathe. Stones and beams belong at marked points where feet do not trip. Drop on the third ladder because the third traps men who cannot run. Oil burns twice. Sand looks small and lasts long. Gravity never changes sides. Torches stagger. Dogs sit where echoes hang. You salt the dark with a little work noise, so the field never knows if tomorrow will hurt more than today. You do not lean out when a pause sounds clean. A pause is bait. Gate crews, your enemy is rhythm. You feel the hinges and the doors sag before anyone sees the crack. Wedges are ready. Bars are checked. The step that booms under the portcullis is your alarm. When rams arrive, you do not waste pause on the first 10 beats. You break the roof chains and eyes of the crew, rocks to edges, hooks to drive pins, sand to blind. If the beat survives, you strike during hand swaps when men change sides. You keep one team for silence, fixing the latch that sticks when wet, shaving a swelling bar, because a quiet repair saves an hour of shouting. Scouts, runners and listeners, your trade is anchors. Bells, deliveries, rosters, meals. Sites without clocks are stories. Sites with clocks are plans. You build triangles of small wrongs, movement, routine, weakness, that point the same way, then you move on the line, not on pride. You change gaits, shoulders, pauses. You carry excuses you can show without a sentence. A net to mend, a cracked shoe, a pot with a chip. If watched, you become dull on purpose. Board watchers look away sooner. Messengers and signalers, you move words by folding them into ordinary life. Dead drops live in churn, ash heaps, scrap baskets, lime sacks, using containers no one loves and marks that belong to the ground, chalk for brick, thread for a nail, wax only when cold holds. You never repeat weight or place. Watches are born from patterns. Brush passes drill fingers until eyes are unnecessary, and happen only in crowds with their own purpose. So if questioned, you can point at the line and keep going. Your phrases survive daylight. The bridge sings tonight is tune and plank warning at once. Clever dies proud, simple lives muddy. Stewards, testers, and household staff, defense inside. You are the process that beats chemistry. Testers are the built-in delay. Plates and cups are switched by habit. Dogs sniff what pride ignores. You rotate locks and beds and routes after a scare, then let routine harden, because routine prevents panic. You remember faces. You notice hands. You know which door sticks when wet, and which step complains on cold days. Your vigilance has a schedule, sharp, then less, then ordinary. And you understand that returning to ordinary is not failure. It is how houses feed people. You protect that ordinary infiltrators, attacking inside houses. You buy minutes, not safety. Your disguise must earn the questions you need to ask. Lamp oil for the north stair, bucket for scullery, brazier to move. Hands betray faster than tongues. A ladle tells if you have burned a wrist. A full pail shows if you have carried weight. Kitchens are shield and judge. If the cook does not know you, every guard will loudly. Testers write the room's clock. If your plan ignores them, you do not have one. Entry is solved by patience. Exit is solved by silence. Stairs echo. Inward doors become shields. Outward doors by 5 seconds. Seconds become space. Space becomes distance. Jesters, porters, and fools, you are not decoration. You are paid to notice what pride ignores. You see the extra cup on a table set for 3. You hear the hinge that breathes. You remember the face that flinched at steam. Your jokes are reports with armor off. In a house that once quiet, you are the voice that says the true thing out loud, which is why your presence keeps intruders from getting comfortable. Dogs and children, both sides. Dogs hear what men miss and move before men decide. Children see what adults ignore and trade views for sweets. They are tools only if used with care. Used wrong, they become damage that returns later in worse form. You keep children away from doors and beer. You give them games that match real needs. Count the red caps between bells, and never tasks that bring beatings. You place dogs where echoes live and learn which ones bark at shadows and which bark at men. Priests, scribes, and clerks, you move hours and names. Choir schedules draw maps of who goes where. Parish changes after quarrels tell you who hides what. Scribes who read aloud in rooms leak names and times. You are the place where rumor hardens into lists. Your job is not to spy. Your habits make spying possible. If you keep your own clocks tight and your lists clean, you deny openings without drawing a sword. Captains, watch, gate, and camp, you walk mud. You do not shout from dry stools. You set visible coin days. You correct in public without cruelty and punish where spectacle trains faster than rules. Then you stop before fear exhausts everyone. You keep relief rumors from rotting nerve by feeding plain stories that survive daylight. You pair veterans with new hands at engines and on walls, so rhythm survives bad nights. You reward noticing more than shouting. You understand that a smashed winch eats more future than a dead archer does, and you aim your men accordingly. Heralds and rumor managers, you know belief bends choices before facts arrive. You seed plain statements that can be checked quickly and repeat them until they live on their own. The ram is faster today. The east gate opens early on market days. Bread day is Thursday. You starve the other side of stories that hold lines together by turning their pride into doubt with small, visible contradictions. You never lean on lies that die at first light. Dead lies break formations. Punishment masters and display setters, authority. You write policy in scenes. Bodies on gates, heads above roads, jokes painted on boards that are not jokes to water carriers. These teach faster than proclamations. You know vigilance has a curve, sharp after spectacle, then less than ordinary. You plan to move during sharp, hold during less, and reset before ordinary can breed the next mistake. You use measure, not frenzy. Display that turns to cruelty sours the town and feeds the enemy stories that travel. Relief scouts and outriders, you are the horizon. You decide whether a dust plume is wind or banners. You are cautious with numbers because rumor outruns horses. You anchor to ridges, bridges, and bell times, not to hope. You carry silence when silence protects, noise when noise buys time. Horns that say, we are near to lift a wall that needs one more day. Quiet that says no help is coming to a ring that must finish now. Ledger keepers, both sides. You kill without steel. You decide which cart rolls. You decide if wheels become weeks or if weeks become nothing. You keep lists of rope, wood, pitch, pay. You show coin on the day promised, so hands hold frames with trust. You hold commanders honest by turning speeches into numbers. Your pen is a slow ram. Your ink is a quiet fire. How these roles fit the same frame. Collection lives with scouts, clerks, children, fools. Verification lives with runners, wall crews, and captains who walk their own routes. Pressure lives with engineers, sappers, gate teams, and anyone who keeps a beat. Psychology lives with commanders, heralds, and display setters who understand that eyes learn faster than ears. Sustainment lives with quartermasters and ledger keepers who turn wood and iron into hours. Exit and repair live with infiltrators, stewards and the quiet teams that fix latches while others shout. None of this needs myth. Each role does small exact things in rhythm. Together they make the same simple system. Remove reasons to fail that teach you nothing. Keep orders that fit in one breath. Aim at parts that replace slow, and let time do what blades cannot. When something finally gives, timber, stone, or a mind, the work belongs to everyone above, because the system does not care which piece breaks first. It only cares that it is not you. Section 17, Short Case Notes, Minimal Change Paraphrase. These are not legends. They are working notes, same facts, same lessons, stripped to what a crew or a house can use. No new claims, no inventions, just the record turned into plain guidance. Plataea, 429 BCE, countering the ground attackers dug to take the wall from below. Defenders did not pray at the parapet. They listened in dirt. Boards under bare feet carried taps better than soil. Chalk marked the rhythm, pick, brace, hollow. They dug towards sound and met men, not theory. Short blades, hot air, smoke that ate breath. The point was simple. Trust in stone fails if you ignore what lives under it. Countermining was not glory. It was necessity. If you hear picks and do nothing, the wall belongs to gravity, not you. Use. When sound says work below, answer with ground, not speeches. Meet sound with sound. Fight where the air is thin before timber decides for you. Rochester, 1212. Props fire, collapse. Sappers did the plain sequence. Dig under, prop with timbers, pack fuel, light. Pig fat made fast heat. Supports failed. A tower dropped. Shock did the rest. The lesson is blunt. A skyline that looked permanent became a hole in an hour. Foundations lie if you let fire speak to them the right way. Use. If you cannot go over or through, go under. Clean plan, no heroics. If you hear that plan against you, make your answer in the same dark. Find the props, flood the burn, or meet the tunnel with steel. Kaffir, 1346. Payload as message bodies went over walls. Not stones alone. Corpses, sick, frightening, meant to turn fear into illness and illness into surrender. It was a throw that said, inside is worse than outside, and people believed it because bodies are arguments you cannot debate from a battlement. Use. Distance engines carry more than weight. They carry messages. If you defend, answer the message for your own people before it rots nerve. If you attack, remember that terror is a tool, not a plan. It buys cracks, not conclusions. Rhodes, 305 BCE. Ambition, weight, limits, a towering machine, tiers, plating, engines on board, rolled as a moving fortress. It showed what scale can promise and what ground can refuse. Weight became drag. Parts failed. The spectacle taught both sides. Height delivered to a wall is panic at arm's length, but ambition without ground under it stalls. Use. Big frames must earn inches every day. Ditches, mud, and fire punish weight better than speeches do. If you build huge, protect wheels, pins, and path. If you defend, ruin path first. Constantinople. Fire that did not go out, Greek fire, clung to ship, wall, and skin and burned, even on water. Siphons spat fear as much as flame. The recipe stayed secret. The effect did not. The city kept a weapon that turned ordered lines into chaos. Boiling pours of water, oil, and sand did the daily work from murder holes, but the thing people remembered was the fire that ignored water. Use. On defense, height converts heat into time. On attack, never believe water is a cure by itself. Process, tasters, switches, ladders in rhythm, becomes brittle when fire rewrites how men think about space. Sterling, Warwolf, surrender to a shadow, a counterweight giant, rose so large that defenders offered to yield before it fired. The king refused to accept until the thing worked, because the working was the point. The frame said, "Your wall is a story," and the city listened. Sometimes the sight of a tool finishes a job that stone would have resisted longer. Use. Engines are messages. Show them on purpose when you need minds to fall first. If you defend, do not watch in silence. Answer with your own show so belief does not leak out of your lines. Assyrian reliefs. Method as theatre rams under roofs. Archers above on towers, crews moving with discipline at gates. The carvings are not merely victory pictures. They are manuals in stone. Pair the beat at the door with arrows on the wall. Teach inevitability by rhythm. Make the city count thumps with you. Use layer pressures, gate beat plus wall blindness. Break roofs and pins if you must stop the beat. If you are the attacker, protect parts first. Men step forward. Axles do not. Murder holes. Anywhere. Funnels and clocks. Calm names for ugly work. Slots over gates and passages where heat and weight fall. Boiling water and oil bite, but sand lasts, finding wrists and necks and burning where hands cannot reach. The tool is a schedule more than a weapon. Lift, tip at the right knock, close, reload, breathe. Use. Attackers' timing ladders must live by this clock. Defenders who forget to reset the clock after one pour train the enemy to step between beats. Edges overnight. Sound beats. Darkness feels like cover, until dogs, drunks, and echo make it a net. Dusk and dawn hide motion inside work noise and sleepy eyes. The latch that whispers at noon shouts at midnight, because a city holds its breath between bells. Use execute at edges. If full dark is forced on you, pay the price in silence and time. Never pay it in speed. Chemistry versus process at tasters. When in houses, poison sounds neat and fails often. Kitchens have eyes. Testers have jobs. Cups and plates switch by habit. Dogs sniff what pride ignores. A plan that depends on the 1 second when the tester looks away is not a plan until you prove that second exists. Use. Treat process as armor. If you attack, you must bend the habit, not outwit the vile. If you defend, add one more small switch and you buy a day. Parts over people. Hours as the real target, a dead man is replaced by a man who steps forward. A smashed winch is replaced by a week you do not have. Oil on hides, roofs over rams, slings that do not shine. Parts that live keep pressure alive. Rocks at pins, beams at roofs, hooks at chains. Parts that die steal tomorrow. Use. Aim where replacement is slow. Count parts like pay. If you are not counting, you are losing to someone who is. Rumor outruns riders. Belief as a tool dust on a ridge becomes banners by noon. A camp that thinks no help comes pushes. A city that believes help is near holds. Words that survive daylight. Simple, checkable. Hold lines together better than threats shouted from a dry stool. Use. Feed your own with plain statements that can be proved before dusk. Starve the other side of stories that make them brave. Ledger pages, wheels, rope, pay. Decide more days than lances do. Compartment and counterwatch. Fails that bend keys, no bells, bells, no doors, doors, no lanes, lanes, no faces. A tale that finds one link starves for the rest. Routes change on your schedule, not theirs. Brush passes only where crowds have their own purpose. Dead drops only in churn with marks that belong to the ground. Use. Waste time on good days to save bodies on bad ones. The cost is patience. The return is survivable breaks, exit over entry. Silence as pay, getting in is a trick. Getting out is craft. Stairs echo. Doors open the wrong way at the wrong time. Props that felt stupid on entry become the only faces that fit at exit. If a room wakes with a story, you failed even if the blow landed. Use. Spend disguise minutes on silence, not on pride. Plan the path where your face still belongs on the way out. Seconds become space. Space becomes distance. Plain summary of the cases. Ground decides when men forget to listen to it. Fire remembered does more work than recipes shared. Weight and wheels fail where mud decides, not where speeches want. Engines shown brake choices faster than engines hidden. Process beats bottles in rooms that know themselves. Parts are futures. Hit or protect them first. Belief bends before facts arrive. Manage it like a supply. Compartment keeps breaks local. Counterwatch keeps them rare. Exit matters most. No story left behind is the only clean win. Nothing here is new. These are the same simple lines you've already seen, set into places with names so the rules stay honest. Section 20. Engines as messages. Fair as payload. Minimal change paraphrase. Siege engines did more than break stone. They carried messages meant to loosen resolve before a wall physically failed. Commanders put the show in plain view, parading frames, testing shots, letting every groan of rope and counterweight preach the same line. You are not safe. The Assyrians set the pattern early, rams beneath roofs and archer decks above, the gate taking a steady beat, while defenders kept their heads down under a comb of arrows. Reliefs from Nineveh even fixed the image, iron-tipped rams rolling up like slow gods of destruction. The psychology was deliberate. Pair rhythm at the door with blindness on the wall until choice narrows to one end. At distance, trebuchets turned gravity into dread. Before a stone ever landed, the city heard the winches, the rope grind, the counterweight's heavy thunk, a heartbeat that made people live between shots. The unknown was a weapon too. Would the next arc bring rock, fire, lime, ahead, or silence? Payloads spoke in their own language. Heads over walls mocked rank. Diseased bodies promised that inside might be worse than outside. The story most retold pins plague corpses to the Mongol siege of Kaffa, 1346, cited as a fear tactic that carried more than terror. Whatever the epidemiology, the doctrine is plain in the source. Engines fling messages as well as mass. Defense answered with shows of its own. Height converted to heat and weight. Boiling water, oil that clung and then lit, and hot sand that slid into the gaps at wrist and neck to cook what it touched. From murder holes, the tidy slots over gates, the pores ran on a clock while stones and carcasses dropped for physics and morale together. The point wasn't only killing, it was breaking machines and nerve at once to buy time. Towers brought panic to arm's length. Slow, vulnerable to mud and fire, yes, but when a gangway kissed the parapet, height turned into touch and the wall's advantage vanished in a breath. Smart ground, ditches, floods, counterscarps answered that promise by ruining the path, because a tower's terror only arrives if inches are earned. Underground, the message was quieter and crueler. Sapping removed certainty itself. Props lit, foundations lied, and a proud line of stone became a hole. Plataea shows the counter. Listen, dig toward taps, meet in hot, thin air. Rochester shows the failure. Pig fat, fire, drop, surrender. No speeches, just soil and timber deciding what men would later call fate. And the special fire that stories remember, Greek fire, worked as theatre because it ignored instinct. Water could not save you. Whether hurled in pots or driven through siphons, it turned order into panic fast. The recipe went with the empire, the fear did not. Beside it, the low-tech pause still did the daily work, and in Chronicles, fear and heat stand side by side for the same purpose. Delay. Put simply, ram set beats people counted. Towers promised reach. Engines at distance made pauses heavy. Saps stole ground, and walls answered with clocks of heat and gravity. None of that is myth-making here. It's the source's plain claim that siege was theatre plus physics, and that the play mattered, because minds often cracked before mortar did. Section 21. Heat. Gravity and delay, minimal change paraphrase. With source lines fire made order fail fast. Thrown from siphons or clay pots, special mixtures turned ships, ladders, and men into one bright panic. And the recipe's secrecy outlived the empire that used it, which is why the memory worked almost as well as the fuel. Beside that high fire, the low answers did constant work. Boiling water, oil and sand poured from the neat slots over gateways, murder holes, straight onto the press below. Oil mattered because it clung and then lit. Sand mattered because it slid into wrist and neck gaps to cook what armor could not cover. None of this looked grand from a distance. At arm's length it ended climbs. Height converted gravity into a tool you didn't have to aim with finesse. Stones, logs, even carcasses dropped from parapets punished not only bodies but machines. Frames, roofs, axles, so that the next hour of attack was poorer than the last. Traps finished the message. Pits, breaking bridges, and spikes did what they were built to do: slow, confuse, punish. The common purpose was time. Every minute held at the wall moved rations toward empty, sickness toward common, and outside help toward nearer. This was always attrition. Physics helped attackers, but delay helped defenders. Engines were theater as well as tools. Their creak and blaze told a story long before stone met stone. Commanders knew to show the work, parading frames, testing throws, setting camps where eyes could see rams being slung and catapults being tried. The message was plain: you are not safe. That's why payloads sometimes spoke in symbols, heads hurled back in armor, bodies cast to say inside is worse than outside. Chronicles tie plague corpses to famous sieges. Whatever the biology, the doctrine is clear in the source. A shot carries fear as cargo. Trebuchets added rhythm to dread. Before the ark appeared, people heard winches, rope grind, and the counterweights thunk. A heartbeat that made a city live between shots. The worst part was the unknown. Rock, fire, lime, ahead, or just a pause heavy enough to bend nerve. The machine did damage. The waiting did work too. None of this asked for myths. It was a schedule with heat at the top, gravity in the middle, and delay underneath. Put on time. Drop on time. Let traps steal pace. The wall's job was not to win a duel. It was to make the day long until bread, health, or hope failed outside. Engines pushed physics. The defense answered with process. That balance, show versus schedule, was the plain shape of siege the source repeats. Section 22, Theater. Dread and the gunpowder turn. Minimal change paraphrase. Siege engines didn't just break stone. They staged a show meant to bend minds before mortar failed. Commanders built and tested their machines, in full view, letting every creak of a winch and grind of rope carry the message, you are not safe. The Assyrians and Romans both understood the value of being seen, parading engines, assembling rams, and trial-firing catapults where the defenders could watch. Siege was theater, and fear was part of the script. Sometimes the payload itself spoke. Severed heads, sometimes still in armor, were hurled back to mock rank. In notorious episodes, diseased bodies, mice, were lobbed to spread panic and plague. The Mongol siege of Kaffa, 1346, is the stock example. Whatever the epidemiology, the doctrine is clear in the source. Long-range shots carried fear as cargo as surely as they carried stone. The trebuchet turned waiting into a weapon. Before you saw a shot, you heard it being born. Winches are creaking, ropes grinding, the counterweights heavy, thunk, a slow heartbeat that made cities live between impacts. The worst part was the unknown. Rock, fire, filth ahead, or a long ominous pause while engineers adjusted aim. Even rhythms and silences became psychological strikes. At the Maukadiameo, the battering ram worked by rhythm mo. Under a roof kept wet against fire, an iron-tipped beam swung in a steady beat that loosened hinges and courage together. Assyrian practice paired that beat with archer decks above. Nineveh reliefs fixed the image of rams rolling up like slow gods of destruction. Greeks refined the tools. Romans systematized them. Ares slung under great sheds, dozens of men keeping time because a big stalled ram is a dead ram. Defense answered with height, heat, and gravity. Boiling paws from above, the same threat rams were roofed against, and drops of stone or timber punished crews and to parts. Roofs, pins, axles, so the next hour of attack was poorer than the last. Traps and ruined approaches slowed towers because delayed is the defender's real weapon. Every minute held at the wall moves rations toward empty, sickness toward common, and relief toward nearer. Then gunpowder sped the old logic without rewriting it. A well-placed cannon shot could do in seconds what a trebuchet demanded hours to attempt. turning proud stonework into a liability. But the underlying question stayed the same. How do you break what's meant to be unbreakable from a distance? And modern shock and awe owes more than a little to those towering flag-snapped engines that first married physics to spectacle. Siege towers changed the fight from a flat push to a vertical race. From the upper decks, archers stripped vision from the wall. On the lower levels, men readied the moment a gangplank could drop. Yet towers were never invincible. They were slow-loved dry ground, and made generous targets for fire arrows, rolling stones, and any terrain the defenders had quietly ruined in advance. Smart defenders dug ditches, flooded moats, or added inner lines, counterscarps, to stall the approach. When a tower finally kissed the parapet, order vanished. The wall stopped being a platform and became a crowded bridge with panic at arm's length. Under the earth, sapping worked without spectacle. The method was simple and vicious. Dig beneath the wall, brace it with timber, pack fuel, and burn. When the props failed, foundations lied and stone obeyed gravity. The craft matured across empires. Its defense, countermining, meant listening through soil, digging toward taps, and colliding in torch-lit, air-starved tunnels where long blades were useless and breath itself became a clock. Platea's counters tell the pattern. Rochester's collapse shows the result when the props go to flame. If you couldn't go over or through, you could take a wall by removing the ground that kept it honest. All the while, the wall answered with height, turned into heat and weight. Boiling water, oil, and sand from murder holes punished ladders and gateways. Oil clung and then lit, and hot sand slid into wrist and neck gaps to cook what armor couldn't cover. Gravity did steady work. Stones, logs, even carcasses dropped to break crews and parts. Roofs, pins, axles, so the next hour of attack was poorer than the last. Traps, hidden pits, collapsing bridges, spikes weren't decorations. They wrote delay into the route. Delay was the point. Each minute held at the wall pushed the camp closer to thin rations, sick tents, and the chance of relief on the horizon. Over distance, engines spoke in a different voice. Commanders showed their machines on purpose, parading frames, building rams where they could be watched, trialing catapults in view, because the creak of winches and the grind of rope planted one line, you are not safe. Payloads sometimes carried the message by themselves, heads hurled back in armor, bodies thrown to make inside feel worse than outside, and the great counterweight frames turned weighting into a weapon, the thunk before the arc, the silence while aim was adjusted, the dread of not knowing whether stone, fire, filth, or nothing was next. Mines bent before mortar did, and when that mental dam cracked, gates opened without a heroic breach. Put together, the tower and the tunnel pressed from opposite directions, while the wall tried to buy time with heat and falls, and the field tried to steal it back with spectacle and rhythm. None of this needed myth. Towers earned inches or died to mud and fire. Saps obeyed timber, flame, and air. Murder holes and traps kept a schedule. Engines made the pause itself heavy. The pattern the source hammers home is simple. Siege is physics and psychology arranged as a system, and the side that keeps its clock longer decides when stone, wood, or will gives way first. Poison sounded elegant in stories, quiet, clean, no steel on bone, but in practice it was guesswork with plants, minerals and toads dosed by eye and betrayed by timing you couldn't predict. A pinch too little left a noble vomiting and cancelling dinner. A pinch too much sickened the would-be poisoner before the first course. Effects ranged from minutes to days, turning plans into long public mysteries that pointed back to the only person who knew too much about herbs. Kitchens were not soft targets. They were noisy security systems with aprons. You didn't season the soup with nightshade unless you could pass stewards, tasters, and even a dog that sniffed before men ate. Meals at noble tables were treated like operations, tasted, blessed, sniffed. So anything that reached the plate had already survived more checks than a royal wedding. Even then, outcomes were disorderly. Laughter at one moment, a clutching belly the next, an astrologer summoned because no one agreed on what they'd just seen. If the victim lived, blame climbed past cooks and tasters and landed on the quiet herbalist with twitchy eyes. Unreliable chemistry met rigid process and lost. Plates and cups were switched by habit. Tasters were a built-in delay. Dogs turned suspicion into a sense you couldn't fool with stories. A plan that depended on the single second when a tester looked away usually wasn't a plan at all. It was hope, waiting to be punished by routine. And if you were caught, you didn't get a quick death. You met tools and questions until you confessed to poisoning everyone from the Duke to the dog. The superstition around the craft didn't help its users. It hurt them. In a world that loved lightning-calling rumors, the man with dried herbs and a foreign accent became a walking accusation. Villages turned fast, a bell, 5 pitchforks, a torch, and suddenly the shadow man explained every choking, fever, and accident. Fame for a poisoner was a net, not a cloak, and the only steady outcome was having to move before the crowd wrote a story you couldn't outrun. Siege pressure was not only engines and walls, it was ledgers turned into hours. A wheel was a week, a rope was a field of hemp you could trip over. Pitch, fodder, shoes, axe heads, and the quiet piles of planks became the true limits on courage. When a clerk marked a missing axle, he was not writing a small note. He was cutting a day off a tower's life. Armies that forgot this did not lose to bravery. They lost to arithmetic that nobody applauded. Bread and water decided who woke stubborn and who woke soft. Bread that didn't break teeth and water that didn't stink were weapons because they pushed the line one more hour. Through mud and mockery, the opposite cut twice. Bad rations made hands slow, tempers fast, and tools careless. A camp is a factory that pays for pressure with routine. When the factory eats itself, filth crossing water, knives traveling from wood to food to flesh without ash and rag, sickness does the work the wall could only hope for. Pay struck deeper than speeches. Coin on the promise day made 10 hands lift a frame that needed 10. A rumor of coin made 7 step forward, and 3 hang back at the edge with good excuses. A captain who walked the muddy lanes with the ledger read out loud, did more for a ram's beat than any threat shouted from a dry stool. People will keep a rhythm if the numbers say the day respects them. If the numbers lie, the rhythm phrase. Supply lines marked the edge of what plans could pretend. Wood paths to the carpenters, rope stacks near the smiths, fodder lines to the animals that pulled the towers. All of them were clocks. Defenders who struck those paths did not win a skirmish. They stole tomorrow. A burned rope yard was not smoke. It was the engine crew standing around with nothing to hold. A scattered herd was not a chase. It was a lost day of hauling, shoeing, hauling again. Inside cities, the market mattered even when the gate stayed shut. Stalls shrank, and stores turned to repairs. People learned to live on fewer kinds of food at the wrong hours. The longer the ring held, the more routine meant survival. Opening the same gate at a new bell. Staggering bakers' fires so smoke did not map the schedule. Shifting guards without writing the change on faces for the field to read. Ordinary was the shield. Ordinary kept panic from getting a voice. Every ledger entry had a mirror in morale. When men saw spare wheels under canvas, coils kept dry and roof hides soaking for the ram, they believed the hour would not fail them. When they saw wet rope paid with shrugs, empty pin buckets and splitting planks left for tomorrow, they learned a different lesson and passed it along without orders. Belief travels on small proofs. The smallest proof is a part ready before it is begged for. Weather taxed ledgers as hard as men. Rain turned ground to glue and consumed wood you had counted for engines. Cold stiffened rope and drank your spare time in thawing that nobody had written on a board. Heat argued with water barrels and won. Plans that pretended ground and air were polite about labor ended in shouted surprises. Good ledgers speak mud's language. They schedule inches instead of yards and make after the rain mean something exact. Rumor was a kind of logistics. A camp that believed no banners would appear on the ridge found energy for risk. A wall that believed help was near saved its stones another day. Ledger talk, Simple checkable lines like wheel day Thursday or rope day at second bell kept your side's story from rotting. Grand claims failed in daylight and took a shift's worth of hands down with them when they died. The enemy's ledger could be attacked with boredom as easily as with fire. Fae sortie that forced crews to reset 3 times in one morning. No bodies traded, just ropes unreeved, pins redriven, hides re-wet. Cost more future than one bloody clash that left their parts intact. Parts are futures. Aim at parts. Defenders knew it at the wall. Attackers had to learn it in the yard. Commanders who understood ledgers wrote orders that fit cold hands and budgets that fit bad weather. They did not plan for perfect ground. They bought surprise with discomfort and paid for reliability with repetition. The same count of pins at dusk, the same walk of the waterline over the latrine boards every hour, the same ash and rag station checked by a name, not a hope. When crisis came, these dull habits became the difference between a stalled ram and a steady beat, between a quiet wall and a story shouted through the city. In the end, siege looked grand, but it fell on humbler nouns. Wheels, rope, wood pay, and the trust that those 4 would be where hands expected them. Engines sang about physics. Ledgers decided whether the song reached the gate. Morale did not float free. It hung from pegs labeled bread, water, coin, and spare. When one peg broke, speeches tried to hold the weight and failed. When all 4 held, will outlasted stone longer than anyone wanted to admit. Plain summary: keep counts where eyes can see, tie counts to tasks, pay on time, protect parts, attack parts, let weather set the tempo instead of pride, and remember that the only glory that matters is ours. Ours bend will. The rest, flame, iron, collapse, arrives after the ledger has already done its work. The battering ram was the blunt opening act, but distance engines turned siege into artillery, tools that punished from afar and planted dread before men ever touched the gate. Where rams needed teamwork at arm's length, the catapult family made walls fear the sky as well as the door. Early Greek ingenuity produced torsion machines that stored violent power in twisted sinew and hair, releasing it as stones, bolts, or fire that crossed courtyards in heartbeats. 2 lines emerged fast. The ballista, a giant crossbow for heavy bolts, and the stone thrower that lobbed boulders onto battlements and roofs. These weren't oversized slings. They were precision frames built to translate math into shock. The Romans made the system portable. Crews broke engines down to cartloads, marched them with legions, and reassembled them outside a city like carpenters uncrating tools. Some Roman pieces could drive 60 LEB shots at speeds that shredded timber gates, parapets, and the unlucky bodies behind them. Professional armies now carried repeatable long-range pressure as part of the standard kit. Psychology traveled with payload. Commanders used catapults to send messages as much as rocks, corpses to spread terror and disease, heads to mock rank, so that every arc carried both weight and meaning. Even a machine's appearance told a story defenders couldn't ignore. You are not safe. For trebuchets, gravity did the work. A counterweight and sling made controlled high arcs that reached inside cities. Barracks, stores, courtyards, rather than merely chipping parapets. The soundscape mattered. Winches creaking, ropes grinding. The counterweight's thunk, a slow heartbeat that made people live between shots, dreading whether the next load would be rock, fire, lime, carrion, or an ominous pause. Meanwhile, the ram remained the on-site brute, roofed against pause, iron-tipped, swung in a rhythm crews had to keep or die under oil, stones and filth from above. The Greeks refined the type. The Romans perfected it, Ares slung under vast sheds, dozens of men timing the beam like thunder rolling along stone. A stalled ram was a dead ram. A steady one felt unstoppable. Move at the edges, not at night, and if darkness is forced by silence with time. Act only on anchored facts, bells, deliveries, meals, stacked into triangles that point one way. Wear a cover that earns the questions you must ask, and train your hands because one pull on a whetstone, or one slosh from a pail exposes a liar. Aim at parts over people, roofs, pins, axles, slings. While defenders keep the wall's clock, pour on the second knock, drop on the third ladder, and attackers break the ram's beat, not the beam. Keep signals simple and weatherproof, passes inside crowds with their own purpose, and dead drops in churn, ash, scrap, lime, with marks that belong to the ground. Remember, kitchens run on process, tasters, switches, dogs, so bottles lose to routine. Below ground meat picks with boards and chalk clocks. Short blades and one torch because air fails first. Use spectacle to train faster than rules and stop, before fear tires your own hands. Answering the enemy's show with small proofs, paid coin, dry rope, wet hides. Let ledgers act as a quiet ram. Wheels and ropes counted where crews can see. Coin on the day promised, plans redrawn for mud, cold or heat. Never enter without naming the door you will leave. Leave as furniture, not a face, and trade speed for seconds that become space and distance. Break your own route on purpose and be boring when watched, because tails prefer main roads. Write orders that fit in one cold breath, 2 beats then move. Blue cloth left. Pour on the second knock, and treat rumor like supply, feeding your side plane statements that survive noon while starving the other's story. And hold the red lines without exception. No anchors, no action. No exit, no entry. Untested signal, don't use it. Cover that can't answer required questions without a speech must change. Night won't hide sound, and payment resting on courage you've only heard about should be treated as none. When breach day comes, act by schedule, not glory. Fix anchors at first light, bells, ration carts, guard change. Keep scouts feeding triangles that point to one line, where the ram's beat has thinned hinges, where the tower has earned inches, where saps have softened ground, and move at the edge hour so work noise hides you. Defenders reset the wall clock, pour on the second knock. Drop on the third ladder, stones to pins and roofs to kill tomorrow's pressure, while attackers aim at parts over people, winch, axle, sling. Gate bar and protect their own parts first. Wet hides, spare pins, dull slings that don't flash. Do not trust night to smother sound. Do not trust a pause outside a postern. And do not enter a room until you can name the door you will leave. Carry the prop that sells your face on the way out. Walk, not run, because stairs echo and seconds become space. Keep orders in one cold breath. 2 beats, then move. Blue cloth left. Hold the lane. And let spectacle teach only as long as it buys behavior before you stop it, so fear doesn't tire your own hands. Kitchens remain process, tasters, switches, dogs. So chemistry is noise, tunnels remain timber, flame, and air so blades stay short and torches few. Towers remain inches and mud is their jury. Trebuchets remain a heartbeat that makes men live between shots. And ledgers remain the quiet ram. Wheels and ropes counted where crews can see, coin on the promised day. Water never crossing filth. Because morale rides on small proofs. Spare wheels under canvas. Coils kept dry, hides soaking, more than on speeches. If relief crests the ridge, rumor outruns riders, so feed your side plane. Checkable lines and starve the other's story with small public contradictions. Keep counterwatch boring on purpose. Change gate, shoulder, pause. Never repeat weight or place at dead drops. Pass only inside crowds with their own reason. And if any red line appears, no anchors, no exit, untested signal, cover that cannot answer a simple question without a speech, a plan that needs a house trained for noise to be silent. Stop. Re-anchor. Split knowledge so breaks bend, not snap. And wait for the next edge hour when steady work can finish what legend promises but never delivers. After the opening, whether a gate sags to the ram's beat, a tower's gangway kisses stone, or a sap drops a section, you still win by schedule, not flourish. Attackers push only where parts are already broken, winch, pin, axle, latch. Keep the beat steady instead of sprinting into echoing stairs. Plant small guards on wheels, ropes and water, so tomorrow's pressure survives today's noise. Defenders fall to pre-marked lines, reset the wall clock at the next choke. Pour on the second knock. Drop on the third ladder. Burn or drag what can't be saved to deny parts. And keep rumor from inventing a route by posting plain, checkable statements that survive noon. Both sides keep orders to one cold breath and routes to the edges rather than full dark, because night magnifies sound and bait clean pauses. Kitchens stay process, tasters, switches. Dogs so chemistry remains a false shortcut. Tunnels stay timber flame air so blades stay short and torches few. Towers remain inches that die to mud unless pathwork holds. And trebuchets remain a heartbeat that teaches people to live between shots. Quartermasters read the ledger aloud, wheel into week. Rope mend field of hemp. Water never crosses filth. Pay on time where hands can see and redraw counts for weather before weather redraws the plan. Since morale rides on small proofs, spare wheels under canvas, dry coils hide soaking, more than on speeches. Counterwatch keeps patterns broken, gait, shoulder pause. Dead drops never repeat weight or spot. Passes live only inside crowds with their own reason, and compartment makes brakes bend instead of snap. So one failed mouth cannot hand over the whole job. If any red line appears, no anchors, no exit, untested signal. A plan that needs a noisy room to be silent. Stop and re-anchor. Split knowledge, shorten orders, aim at parts, and wait for the next edge hour because steady pressure, physics plus theater, gravity plus routine, bends will, and the only clean finish is the one that leaves no story behind you except that tomorrow's clock still works. When the wall gives, by gate sag, gangway touch, or sap collapse, the end isn't a trumpet. It's paperwork, fire buckets, and rumor control. Attackers who win by schedule must keep tomorrow's schedule alive the same hour they claim the breach. Postguards on parts, wheels, axles, rope stacks, water. Keep the ram's roof wet because sparks fly during looting, and move by orders that fit one cold breath, so panic doesn't write new plans in the dust. Defenders who fall back do the same arithmetic in reverse. Drop to the pre-marked line. Pour on the second knock. Drop on the third ladder at the next choke. And burn or drag what cannot be saved, so the enemy inherits less than a working yard. Neither side gets to be grand. Both sides get to be on time. Occupation starts with ledgers, not banners. Streets that were battle lines become supply routes. Markets that starved become repair halls. Doors that bragged become inventories. Spare wheels under canvas, coils kept dry, and roof hides soaking. The same small proofs that sustained pressure outside now persuade a shaken town that tomorrow will not be worse than today. If coin day slips or water crosses filth, a different siege begins inside the gate, and it is fought with boots, buckets, and coughs. Ledgers kill more often than lances, in victory as in siege, because ledgers decide whether routine returns. Process outruns chemistry in the aftermath too. Kitchens remain judges. Tasters go on tasting, plates go on switching, dogs go on sniffing, and any quiet revenge by Vile still dies against the same choreography that beat bottles during the siege. The fastest way to stop new plots is the oldest. Make ordinary come back. Bread that doesn't break teeth, water that doesn't stink. Wages on the day they were promised. These things tell hands to keep working and mouths to stop inventing. Ground remembers. Paths carved for towers turn to mud traps after rain if they're not drained. Filled trenches sink. Burned props under fallen curtain walls leave hollows that crack under carts. Repair crews that argue with dirt repeat the same old mistake, pretending weather is polite. Good overseers schedule inches, not yards, and right after rain is something exact. Ditch cleared, plank reset, axle greased, so that a city does not defeat itself while celebrating. Spectacle shifts but doesn't vanish. The same commanders who paraded engines to bend minds will now display consequences to teach faster than laws. Heads at gates. Boards that joke where water carriers must pass. Engines rolled through streets to say order lives here. Used with measure, it sets behavior. Used past the point of learning, it exhausts the town and gifts the enemy a story that travels. Show then stop remains the rule. Rumor outruns riders in peace as in war. A dust plume became banners yesterday. Tomorrow, a merchant's late cart becomes relief on the ridge. Occupiers who learned during the siege will feed their side plain. Checkable lines. Wheel day Thursday, rope at second bell. Gate opens early on market day, and cut the enemy's legend with small public contradictions that survive noon. Stories that die at first light take a shift's worth of hands with them when they go. The cure is visible routine plus numbers read where eyes can see. Below ground, timber, flame, and air keep speaking, even after flags change. Sapped sections need honest props and drains, not pride. Counter-miners who used boards and chalk clocks to live now use them to keep masons alive. The tunnel that almost killed you yesterday is the cellar that will swallow a cart next week if you pretend victory changed physics. Gravity never changes sides. At the gate, rhythm still rules. A city that opens and closes on the same bells writes weakness for the next enemy. An army that marches supplies in at the same hour teaches thieves and resentful men the timetable. Break your own pattern on a schedule you own. Buy surprise with discomfort and then freeze it into the new ordinary. Ritual protects and exposes. The difference is whether you write it or it writes you. Records are the last weapon. Clerks who kept siege ledgers become the historians of what must not repeat, which hinges boomed, which dogs barked at shadows, which orders failed because they took 2 breaths to say. The best chronicle is a checklist. No anchors, no action. No exit, no entry. Untested signal, don't use it. When these appear in ink on the barracks wall, they outlive speeches and keep a city from relearning pain the expensive way. Finally, the cleanest victory remains the one that leaves no story. Infiltrators who entered as a face must depart as furniture. Captains who won by schedule must hand the schedule to stewards who will enforce it with ledgers, not lances. Households that survived by process must keep the choreography that beats bottles and pride. The siege ends when ordinary returns and stays. Everything else is noise that will call the next trouble to your door. A labyrinth can be a journey, not a jail. Corridors and nested rooms standing for life, death and the underworld, yet without a deciphered script. Every reading risks drifting from insight into imagination. If a culture spoke in symbols rather than linear stories, we are left to interpret, what is the place saying? We can hear rhythms and see images, but the meaning stays just out of reach, like a thread that keeps unspooling. Ruins can feel alive without needing ghosts. Walk such halls today and there's a hum beneath the stone, echoes of myth and of lives whose questions refuse to end. Centuries later, the site still holds us. Tourists wander, archaeologists dig, writers keep spinning tales in its shadow. The Minotaur may be legend, but the feeling of the maze is real. What we don't know is louder than what we do. We don't have the rulers' names, their prayers, or their laws. What we do have, love of beauty, reverence for nature, a balance of architecture with art, of ritual with daily life, and a primacy that came before the Parthenon, before Rome, before Hebrew temples or Persian palaces. Palace as city, city as temple, temple as story. Maybe that's the point. The labyrinth isn't a riddle to be cracked, but a narrative carved in stone. The legend didn't spring from nowhere. It rose from confusing corridors, bull rights, and the awe the place inspired in generations trying to make sense of it. The Greeks framed it as myth. We recast it as archaeology. At its core, it has always been both. Even in daylight, maps drawn, frescoes reconstructed, the mystery does not retire. The boundary between fact and legend still shimmers like heat over rock. That's why it endures, because it withholds just enough. Some histories aren't meant to be solved so much as felt. Ancient, tangled, half-remembered, more than a dot on a map. The labyrinth is a question that pulls you deeper. And like Theseus, we are still following the thread. Strip the story to its frame and the source keeps saying the same thing. Siege is physics plus theatre run on a clock. Engines push from afar, towers deliver reach, rams teach inevitability by beat. Walls answer with height turned into heat and gravity. Pause on schedule and drops that break parts before people. Saps ignore pride and let timber, flame, and air decide. Rumor moves faster than riders, and delay is a defender's truest weapon. Minds bend early. Mortar follows. From that frame fall the plain rules. Act only on anchors and build triangles before you move. Keep orders to one cold breath. Choose edges overnight. Aim at parts over people because parts replace slow. Split knowledge so breaks bend, not snap. And count what turns into hours. Wheels, rope, wood pay because ledgers kill more often than lances. None of this is clever. It is small, exact, and repeatable. If an ending looks sudden, a gate swings, a wall drops, a garrison yields to a machine it never let fire twice. It was built by hours that didn't ask for applause. Wet hides kept wet. Pins replaced before begging. Ropes kept dull and dry. Stones stacked where boots wouldn't trip. Dogs posted where echoes live. A ledger read aloud on coin day. The spectacle is what people remember. The routine is what got them there. Failure, likewise, isn't a thunderclap. It is comfort written as a pattern. Speed without verification. Chemistry trying to beat kitchens that run on process. Belief in night as a cloak. And plans that name the way in, but not the way out. Each step feels small. Together, they hand your clock to the other side. The remedy and the source is boring on purpose. Shorten orders. Re-anchor, recheck, break your own rhythm, protect parts, and only then ask time to work for you. Even the labyrinth, more felt than solved, lands on the same lesson. Not every truth arrives as a neat sentence. Some truths are walked, counted, and staged, until meaning appears by repetition. The maze endures because it withholds just enough. A siege endures because it repeats just enough. In both you follow a thread, schedule, not charm. So the plain ending is this: remove reasons to fail that teach you nothing. Keep the clock when fear wants a speech. Spend courage at the margin, and let hours do what blades cannot. When something finally breaks, timber, stone, or a mind, the win is quiet, no legend, just a city that wakes without a story and a camp that still has a schedule in the morning. That, in the source's terms, is the cleanest victory.